Hey, today's episode is in part sponsored by one of my favorite sponsors, actually. It is Henson Shaving. For a long time, we had a different, years ago, actually, it was now, we had a different shaving sponsor. And then I grew this thing. And then I realized, like, I don't want to be doing the subscription and all that stuff. And Henson Shaving came along. And, now it's just up here, just on the sides. But this is a completely different type of razor. In many respects, it's a throwback, except Henson shavers use incredibly modern technology. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer. They've made parts for the International Space Station. They've made parts for the Mars rover. And now they're bringing their precision engineering to your shaving experience. Bottom line is, the reason why you get a bad shave is not because the blade is dull, although, obviously after a while, a blade gets dull, but it's not because it's so sharp. That's a fairly easy thing to do. The tough part is to make sure that the blade doesn't vibrate. In other words, it's like a diving board, and the further away from the shaver it is, the less control the shaver has. And this one, with their computer numerical control, thank you. I can never remember what the name of that machine is. The blade sticks out from this just like 0.0013 or something. Essentially the thickness of a human hair. And so you get a very, very clean shave, vibration-free. They also built in these channels. I don't know if you can see that here. So you don't have to bang your razor on the sink to get the hair and shaving cream out of there. And this thing feels great in your hand, but here's the part that is amazing, and I'm convinced only would happen with a Canadian company, because they didn't want to make the best razor business. They want to make the best razor, period. And so once you buy a Henson shaver, there's no subscription, there's no obsolescence, there's no proprietary blades. After you buy this razor, it will cost you $3 to $5 a year for the rest of your life to shave, because it uses those old school, what do you call them, blades? Just the razor blades. And you pop them into here, and that's it. They're non-proprietary. They're going to be around until all of us pass away. And so this is a razor you will have for the rest of your life. Now, they come in a couple of different colors and a couple of different models, but these are beautiful razors. And now they will also give you the first couple of years supply of razors for free. So it's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that will last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/majority. Pick the razor for you. Use the code majority, and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. All you got to do is you got to make sure to put them into your shopping cart. It won't do it automatically. Choose them. It'll go into the shopping cart, and then you'll get them for free. That's 100 free blades when you head to Henson Shaving, HENSONSHAVING.com/majority. Use the code majority. This is also a great gift, incidentally. This is really a great gift. So check it out. Link will be in the podcast and YouTube description. And now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, February 14th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Griffin Ritzie, union organizer at Amazon's largest air hub in Kentucky, KCVG, it's called. He was also fired, and he'll be with Marcio Rodriguez. Well, no, okay. And then we'll be talking to Dr. Thayer Ahmed, emergency room physician and assistant program director of the Advocate Christ Emergency Medicine Residency Program, who is recently back from a stay in Gaza as he was helping work at a hospital in Khan Yunis. Also on the program today, House impeaches Department of Homeland Security Mayorkas by one vote. Speaking of which, your not favorite Democrat Tom Suozzi wins in New York 3rd special election. That vote would have stopped that impeachment yesterday. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, Democrats hold the Pennsylvania House in another special election win. And congratulations to workers in Denton, Washington. What's it? Renton, Washington. Now have either a $20.29 or an $18.29 minimum wage, depending on where you're working. South Africa asked the IJC to urgently examine Israel's targeting of Rafah in its ongoing genocide case. This as the State Department supposedly reviewing reports of civilian harm in Gaza for its review of weapons that are sent to Israel. They got 90 days, though, to complete that from about a week ago. Israel blocks major flour shipments to Gaza on the brink of a massive famine there. In LA, Disneyland characters are looking to unionize. Back in the House Rules Committee to take up legislation to amend Section 02 of the Foreign Intel Surveillance Act. Pakistani opponents of Imran Khan joined forces to block the ascension of former PTI members to the prime ministership. And lastly, the CDC either plans or is considering dropping the 5-day isolation COVID guidelines. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Got a lot to talk about today. The Suozzi wins in New York's 4th District. He ended up winning more or less with the same percentage difference as Joe Biden had back in the 2020 election. Turnout, obviously, for a special election is lower than it is for an off-year election, which is lower than a presidential election. So we don't really have much to measure that against. We will talk later in the program about the way this is being spun. Yesterday, I think we mentioned you're not going to like the spin if he loses, and you're not going to like the spin if he wins. But a couple of points to keep in mind. This is a very idiosyncratic district. It is one of, if not the wealthiest district in the country, but it's also a fairly diverse district in terms of ethnicities and immigrants and whatnot. The outside expenditure groups, including the DMFI, outspent the Republicans, not quite 2-1, but close. They had a horrible candidate. Suozzi obviously also was a well-known name. He had been a congressman there, except for the less than 2 years of George Santos. And he never got defeated either. He essentially quit to run for governor. There's a lot of people out there who want to make this about immigration or crime, but he also led quite a bit, particularly in the later weeks, closed with a lot of ads about abortion rights, which in the last go-round in New York State, you did not hear much about. So the spin from this is going to be all over the place. But the bottom line is the Democrats pick up one more in the House. And, you know, this for establishment Democrats, it will provide them with the argument of you need to have somebody who's fairly conservative in these purple districts. If you really want to win, that's what constitutes a good quality candidate. I would also argue that if the Democrats are prepared to outspend the Republicans near 2-1 in every House seat that is a swing seat, I think Democrats are going to do quite well. There is some indication, too, though, that people were sick of how feckless the Republicans have become. So I don't know what kind of data we'll have coming out of this, hard data, but a lot of it's going to be spin. But here is Tom Suozzi at his election party and part of his victory speech.
Let's send a message to our friends running the Congress these days. Stop running around for Trump and start running the country. It's time to find common ground and start delivering for the people of the United States of America. The people are watching. They want us to start working together. So our message is very clear. Either get on board or get out of the way. Let's send.
Now, he was one of the original problem solvers caucuses, and he was in Congress for at least 3 terms before this. I think it was at least 3. And I would suggest that it didn't work, the whole problem solver caucus, just FYI. Yeah. And so the idea that there is a, you know, and again,
I'm looking over at the common ground right now, and there's a shirtless guy with a Viking hat on,
exactly,
yelling about January 6th on top of it.
The bottom line is that, you know, I understand the expediency of pretending that Donald Trump is the problem with the Republican Party. But Donald Trump is, again, I repeat, a symptom of the problem of the Republican Party. And it may be, you know, make for some good campaign pablum. And in the, whatever it is, 15 seats that are competitive in the entire country, if you need to say that, all well and good. But it ain't going to do you any good to say that in the rest of the congressional districts that you're running in. Meanwhile, we should also just say that as Suozzi was starting his speech, some heroes from the Long Island DSA got up and just as I think he took the stage, they basically protested the support that Suozzi undoubtedly will give for the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And so here they jumped on stage. It's pretty good. Now, this was a race that the Republican was a former member of the IDF, an Ethiopian Jew who was airlift. I imagine this was in the 1980s airlift, and she had served in the IDF. obviously a staunch supporter of Israel. Swazi also a staunch supporter of Israel, receiving millions of dollars from the AIPAC-affiliated DMFI. So that's who, that's who's coming out of that district. So good that the Republicans have one less vote in the House and the Democrats have one more. But probably in the top 10 of my least favorite Democrats in the House, I would argue. I don't know. Could be top 20. I'm not sure. But there it is. And we'll talk more about that later. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Griffin Ritzie. He's a union organizer at Amazon's largest air hub in Kentucky. And he was fired. He's filed complaints with the National Labor Relations Board and with Amazon, and we'll get an update on that and the efforts to unionize that air hub in Kentucky. Then we'll be talking to Dr. Thayer Ahmad. He's an emergency room physician in Chicago, I think it is, and he just did a 2 or 3 week stint in Gaza, and we will talk to him about that, obviously. First, a couple words from our sponsor. You always hear about, brilliant duos, Bonnie and Clyde, I guess. Maybe that's not a great one. They didn't end so well. Emma's out today. But of course, I'm really talking about you and Shopify. Yes, Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Takes you from the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify is there to help you grow and is easy for you and helpful regardless of your size. How do I know? Our Shop.Majority Report radio merch site. Shopify. For a long time, I just did not want to do merch because I thought it's just going to be a pain. We're not going to be able to update things. We're actually updating it right now. We got a new shirt. Bradley forgot to remind me about, but I'll tell you about it later. But the point is, Shopify made it really, really easy. And if we end up selling more and more merch, we do a live show, it integrates with your point of sale and your online stuff. Plus, Shopify not only has their all-in-one e-commerce platform, not only does their in-person point of sale system, but it's also on all the social media apps. Shopify has got you covered. Shopify helps turn browsers into buyers. They have the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading e-commerce platforms. And you can sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic. It's your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., and Shopify is the global force behind brands like Allbirds. Why did I have trouble saying that? It's the shoe thing. And Rothy's, and millions of others of entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success at every step of the way, because businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/majority. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/majority right now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/majority. Put the link in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Also, are you aware that according to the CDC, fewer men than women meet the minimum daily intake recommendations for fruits and vegetables? I'm looking at you, Matt. And you, Bradley, for that matter. You guys don't eat well. You don't eat healthily. I know I didn't. I still don't. But men,
I'm not going to object.
Men are more likely to overvalue exercise and undervalue nutrition. And in this office, I think we undervalue both. But enter Ritual, a multivitamin scientifically developed for men to help fill nutrient gaps in their diets. For me, a big issue for a long time has been vitamin D. My doctor was always like, you got to take vitamin D. And I'm like, I will. I would leave the doctor's office. I would buy, a multivitamin, and then I would take it for a month, and then I would stop taking it because I ran out, and then I would forget. And then you get out of the habit, and that's it. Well, I've been taking now, over 50. They're over 50. I can't remember what the name of it is, but Ritual's men for over 50. That's where I'm at. My doctor does not complain about my vitamin D anymore. I mean, I guess it's not a complaint, but it's up. Ritual has 10 key nutrients, and they have 2 delayed release capsules per day designed to dissolve later in the small intestine, an optimal place to absorb nutrients. And the thing that's great about this too is it's very gentle on your stomach. So the other thing that kept me from taking my vitamins was like, oh wait, I got to do it after I eat, and then I would forget, and then that's it. No, when you're reminded of taking it, you're taking it. You don't have to worry about it because it's gentle on your stomach. Ritual works with world-class certification bodies to validate their products. In other words, you know where they're coming from. Traceable. I don't know if anybody else does that, but Ritual does, and it makes you feel good about where you're taking this stuff from. Their multivitamins are vegan, non-GMO, gluten and major allergen free. They're a certified B Corp. Like I say, they're made traceable. Ritual uses scientific tools to select lower carbon packaging, prioritize sustainably sourced ingredients, and set ambitious climate goals. Ritual is a female-founded B Corp, meaning they're holding themselves accountable to not just their company's financial health, but also to the health of people and our planet. Essential for Men is a quality multivitamin from a company you can actually trust. Get 20% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/majority. Start Ritual or add Essential for Men to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/majority for 20% off. Of course, they have multivitamins for everybody, so check it out. The description will be in the podcast, or I should say the links in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Griffin Ritzie, union organizer at Amazon's largest air hub in Kentucky. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. Joining us now, Griffin Ritzie, union organizer at Amazon's largest air hub in Kentucky, called Amazon KCVG. We were also supposed to be, Griffin, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Now, we were also supposed to be talking to Marcio Rodriguez, who is a plainside ramp worker and a member of the Amazon Labor Union Organizing Committee, or at the KCVG. And we should say, you were one of the founders of, I guess, or one of the early organizers of this union. You have since been fired. We'll get to this. You filed a complaint with the National Labor Board and with Amazon. Marcio was going to join us. He just got pulled in for a random drug test.
Yeah, that's right. With my firing, this company is aware that we've got momentum, that we have a strong campaign, that we're prepared to take on this company and fight for what we need. But they're scared. And, that's why they went after me. That's why they're increasing these random drug tests that are happening day to day, week to week. And unfortunately, it just so happened that Marcio got pulled in before we started the interview today. So.
All right. Well, no worries. But it is it is interesting, and it gives us a sense of like exactly what they're doing to make it hard, essentially, to unionize. So let's back up. Tell us how you started organizing and what's happened since then.
Yeah. So in fall of 2022, Amazon took our peak pay. So in 2021, when the facility opened, during peak season around the holidays, we would get an extra $2 an hour, for a few months. And they took that away from us in 2022. And our coworkers, especially at the time, inflation was out of control. Rents in the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky region are out of control and still are. Gas, basic goods. And, we started a petition, myself and my coworkers, to fight for peak pay, to bring it back and make it a permanent raise. We got a little over 400 of our coworkers to sign on to that. We took that to management, and they told us, they waved us off. And from that point, coworkers said off the jump that, it'd be nice to have our seasonal peak pay, but what we really need is a real living wage and a union to have real job security at Amazon.
And give us a sense of where was this relative to what was going on at JFK 8 in Staten Island? Were you guys aware of that movement? Was it? Are you guys unionizing in the wake of that?
Yeah. So we were inspired by the historic victory in Staten Island by Amazon labor union there, and took up the demand for 30 an hour, which I think, to their credit, the Teamsters at Amazon are beginning to take up 30 an hour. It's becoming a broader demand on the labor movement, much like 15 was a rallying cry, 10, 12 years ago. The situation's changed in this country. You have billionaires like Jeff Bezos, the political class, the CEOs, the boardrooms at these companies making hand over fist through COVID. And to today, where, inflation's out of control. And, a $30 an hour starting wage at a company like Amazon that makes millions a minute off our labor is not much to ask for. So we took up that demand. We're fighting for free childcare provided by the employer, 180 hours of paid time off, and talking to our coworkers about what it means to have job security, what it means to have union representation, to actually hold this company to standards, real standards, on employment terms.
And so you got fired. When did this happen? It's like months ago.
Just a couple weeks ago. So,
is that right?
Okay. So I've been working at Amazon for 3 years, 2 years at this site, KCVG. And, I've been making some trouble there for a while now. And they know our campaign has momentum. We've collected well over 1,000 union cards since March last year when we launched the campaign. And, it's not even really about me per se. It's about wanting to scare my coworkers, this is somebody who was involved in this campaign from the beginning. They know that we're close to filing for an election, and that we're building our strength in the workplace. And that's why I was fired. But, my coworkers are fired for any number of reasons. Small safety infractions. They're beginning to do more mandatory drug testing at random. They cast a wide net, and they hire up during peak season. And then we're in firing season right now from, basically January to the end of February, where, they want to get their numbers down. They want to cut back on their labor costs, and they treat us as expendable.
They also fired another union activist, Edward Clark. I guess that was a couple of months ago. So and this is, Ed was actually really early on, before we even decided to launch our independent campaign. But Ed, somebody who really stuck up for his coworkers, and younger Black worker, had a lot of authority in the workplace. And I think early on they were like, we got to get this guy out of here. So it kind of, this company makes strategic calculations based on how to stop us at any point, and that's what they've done here. So. And you've got complaints in at the National Labor Relations Board, obviously a little bit too early to have, any type of response from them. But tell us about the Constitution. You guys have done something that I haven't. I don't know if I've seen it as much. It's essentially you guys created a charter for the union before. It's like a mission statement, I guess.
Yeah, so a couple weeks back, for a 10-day period, we surveyed over 500 of our coworkers to weigh in on key questions about our union, to establish our founding principles. So we asked them questions like, how much should our members pay in dues before we get a first contract? How much are people willing to contribute on dues? What are the rights of membership in our union? Should we have the right to recall elected leadership, the right to override on key decisions like financial expenditures and the rest? And, overwhelmingly, our coworkers think that they should have a voice in the workplace, and so we took the results of that survey and we drafted up our Constitution. And now, since our launch event last week for the Constitution vote up until the 25th of this month, we're going to have many more coworkers participating in this process to show them that, Amazon flies in dozens of these union busters, corporate lawyers, from Littler Mendelson, Ogletree, and some of the top union busting firms in the world. And they try to divide us and lie to us. Oh, the union, some bureaucrat's going to decide how much you pay in dues, and it might be $100 a day or $1,000 a day, who knows? And, we want to empower our coworkers to have a real say in this process and say, look, I was in those meetings at the union office. I voted for a $30 a month due, and, just cut across some of the union busting lies by giving people a right to participate in this process.
So what's the process going forward? Like do you guys do sign cards at this point? Do you go in, have recent sort of changes from the National Labor Relations Board shifted your strategy at all? At the end of last year, there was a ruling essentially that says that is sort of up the value, I guess, of card signatures. Tell us what to the extent that you can. I guess there's probably some stuff you don't want to necessarily have Amazon know, but what's the plan now?
Yeah. So last year we proved that we're a union by fighting around demands like 30 an hour, 180 hours of paid time off, taking up other demands like translation rights. Marcio was going to talk a lot about that today, where, Amazon doesn't provide translation services at KCVG like it does at other sites. They hide behind the idea that, English is the language of aviation. Pilots, air traffic controllers are required to speak English. So they discriminate against, ESL speakers, mostly French-speaking, Senegalese, Congolese immigrants in the area. And we fought around those demands and delivered petitions, marched into the HR office, marched in the boss's office, and took a number of workplace actions and fought around those demands. And now, with the Constitution drafting and vote, we're formalizing our structures as a union. We're discussing our principles and what we want to fight for in a contract. And the next stage in this fight is to file for an NLRB election in the coming months and force the company to recognize us. And, I think what we learned, certainly in Staten Island and in other examples, is that it doesn't mean much to Amazon or the billionaire class whether or not you win a union election. Amazon is still not bargaining good faith in New York for a contract. And then they're flying their union busters out to my workplace and saying, oh, the union's never won a contract. They've never fought for anything. 30 sounds nice, but that's a promise, not a guarantee. And it's like, well, the company is refusing to bargain in good faith. And I think what we saw across the street last month, a month and a half ago with the DHL strike, ramp workers, plainside workers at DHL won a contract just across the street, one of the only non-union super hubs in DHL globally. And they had to go on strike to fight for that contract. And it's going to be the same case just to bring Amazon to the table, just to force their hand in bargaining at KCVG. So we see that as all one process. And so, we're building up for a vote in an NLRB election, and we're building up our capacity to organize in the workplace to a strike.
That's interesting. And I think from a more global perspective, hopefully the idea of more examples of the unionization happening, because that's become easier. But then just to remind people, the next stage of that fight is that the corporations, whether it's Starbucks or Amazon, they keep dragging out the actual creation of a contract, and there's no real enforcement mechanism yet with the National Labor Relations Board to sort of force them to the table. And sort of the next step at the NLRB is to make that an unfair labor practice in and of itself, which would add some leverage there. Tell us just like what do you guys do as opposed to like the warehouse? What do you do at a facility that is an air hub?
Yeah, so KCVG is the center point of Amazon's growing air freight network, not only in the US, but globally. And, we are unloading air freight from the planes that come in. There's about 40 flights that come and go every day, every 24 hours. And that's sorted through a sortation facility. Myself, I worked as a tug driver, so I would haul the freight around the ramp, to and from planes. And we process a lot of volume. I mean, I think something like over 1 million units a day out of this facility, nationwide. There's 14 endpoints, at different, locations around, the U.S., mostly Austin, California, New York, and elsewhere. And, I think, people think of Amazon, they think of a fulfillment center. And, even the management, and we work in a heavy industry, right? We operate heavy machinery, freight loaders, freight haulers, all weather conditions, rain or snow, day or night, doesn't matter if it's 100 degrees out or 8 degrees, we're going to be out there. And, the company treats it like it's just another fulfillment center. Like, oh, it's just another warehouse, except you're working with planes. And, there's real safety concerns working around these planes. Somebody can get their hair caught in a conveyor or, that gets sucked up into an aircraft engine if they're not careful. And time and time again, we see this company shortcutting safety standards in the workplace.
What can folks do? Is there any way for folks outside the union or from in the area or outside the area to support you guys?
Yeah, we're really proud of the support we've built in the labor movement and the community in this area. But I would encourage anyone, whether a union member or not, you support, organizing Amazon workers, to go to unionizeamazon.kcvg.org/donate. Give 30 an hour, $30 to fight for 30 an hour at KCVG. It goes a long way. We're independent, grassroots funded. And if you're a union member, pass a resolution in your local and, try to donate a couple $100, $1,000, whatever you can. Our fight's your fight and vice versa. So we're going to continue to take on this company.
Griffin Ritzy, union organizer at KCVG. We will put a link to that site for you in our podcast and YouTube description and at majority.fm. Thanks so much for joining us, and good luck, and keep us updated.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Dr. Thar Ahmad, emergency room physician and assistant program director at the Advocate Christ Emergency Medicine Residency Program in Chicago, on his recent, stint. I don't know what you would call it. The recent time he's had working in the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in Gaza. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. Joining us now, Dr. Thayer Ahmad. He is an emergency room physician and assistant program director of the Advocate Christ Emergency Medicine Residency Program in Chicago. And Thayer, you have returned, I guess it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago?
About a couple of weeks now.
A couple of weeks ago from working at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. Let's just so that we can sort of like have a baseline. You are of Palestinian heritage, first generation. I know your folks grew up in the West Bank. You visited Gaza in the past. Give us just like a baseline of like what it was to work in these hospitals in Gaza prior to October 7th.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question because it can sort of allow us to understand just the scale of the devastation. I mean, before October 7th, the Gaza Strip had a lot of healthcare needs and support was depended on from international aid organizations. I'm a board member for Med Global, and we've been there, 4 or 5 times, and we work on different projects just trying to increase the capacity of healthcare workers. Before October 7th, at any given moment, if you wanted an essential medicine, these are things like diabetes medicines, blood pressure medicines, the chance of you finding that in the local inventory in the Gaza Strip was 55%. They had a 55% stock for essential medicines. This is determined by the World Health Organization. Now, if you look at Israel, that number is 100%. If you look at the West Bank, another Palestinian territory, that number is around 88 to 90%. So the Gaza Strip did not have a lot of capacity to deal with any sort of additional burden. And that was really exposed during COVID. And in response to that as well, the Gaza Strip was dependent on transferring patients out of the Gaza Strip prior to October 7th. I mean, you're talking about cancer patients, you're talking about pediatric patients, you're talking about any sort of patient that needed somewhat specialized care. They had to leave the Gaza Strip. They'd either go to East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Egypt, or anywhere else that they could be accepted. And so that tells you or gives you an indication that the healthcare system in the Gaza Strip was kind of operating in a delicate balance. The second that we cut off everything towards them after October 7th and we left them on their own, not allowing any sort of support to get in, I think that's when everybody in the international humanitarian community, the sirens were going off. I mean, it was absolutely concerning from the first week. And now we're, well past 120 days.
So we started at precarious, but and this is in terms of like the healthcare facilities. How did you tell us about like when you went to, I guess, the first days that you entered back into the Gaza Strip, how you got there? And we should just tell people that Khan Yunis is about 5 miles, 2 hours north of Rafah Gate. So it's in the what would be considered, I guess, southern Gaza or the southern half of Gaza. Tell us like what it looked like when you got there. Like, could you see the difference in what had taken place just as you entered in Gaza and made your way up to Khan Yunis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll even share with you that we were planning, Med Global was planning on sending doctors late October prior to the war. I mean, that was our scheduled next mission project. And so obviously that was delayed because nobody was allowed to enter. And we had continued to wait for just give an idea of when Rafah border would open to allow doctors and healthcare workers and humanitarian workers to enter. That opportunity did not come until the last week of December. And I went in the first week of January. So we land in Egypt and we drive straight through the Sinai to get to the Rafah border to enter into the Gaza Strip. Sam, the second you walk in, the second you cross over, you feel the difference. I've been there 5 times and it's obviously different. The first and most obvious thing is if you go through passport control on the Gaza side, there's no electricity. And we had arrived right after it was sunset. And so you're kind of operating in the dark, trying to grab your bag, trying to make sure that you find the bus that you're supposed to get in to take you to a safe house. And right as you're hopping to that bus, it's tent city. Rafah, prior to October 7th, there weren't a lot of people there. There's around 250,000. I mean, it's a very rural area, not a lot of families. It was sort of, this very small town. It had a small town vibe to it. When I crossed over in the beginning of January, massive amounts of people, all in the street. It was tent city in Rafah. Anywhere that you could see, you saw people there. And the only way that we were able to see them was from the headlights of our van because nobody had any electricity. And it was really striking. I mean, right away, this was not the Gaza that I had seen just in March or in November the previous year. I mean, it was totally different. And so as we made our way to Khan Yunis, it was in the midst of the beginning of the Israeli military offensive on Khan Yunis. And so we had known that we would be exposed to a lot of bombs. We knew that it was going to be very dangerous. But the other part of this, not related to the war, not related to the F-35s that are dropping bombs, was Khan Yunis was so overcrowded. And as soon as I got into the medical complex, there were families everywhere sheltering in and around the hospital. Even the journalists that were reporting from the front of Nasser Hospital, they were staying in tents right next to the hospital. Everybody assumed that the hospital would be safe, that the medical complex would be a safe way. And as you mentioned, Khan Yunis is technically in the south of the Gaza Strip. That's where everybody was told to go. They said, go over there. It's safer in the south. And tens of thousands of people were sheltering there. I mean, it was such a insane scene to see. I mean, it really felt apocalyptic in a sense because you see the destruction and the damage of the buildings. You see people sheltering in the schools that were still standing, in the hospital. And then you see tents everywhere. You're talking about 10 to 15 family members in a really small tent. I mean, it was really overwhelming from the very first moments that we got there.
When you arrived at the hospital, how many of the people working in the hospital, how many of you had come from the north? I mean, how many existing medical facilities existed north of Khan Yunis at that point?
Yeah, I mean, barely any. North of Khan Yunis, you could say in the middle area, there's Deir al-Balah, which has a hospital called Aqsa Hospital. While I was there, Aqsa Hospital was under siege as well. And many of those providers that were in the hospital, as well as the patients, had been displaced and they were moving more south. In the hospital of Nasser Hospital, there was probably 50% of the staff that had been displaced from the north. And many of them had gone through similar situations where they were essentially, they were essentially also surrounded and forced to evacuate. I mean, the healthcare providers, the nurses, the doctors, anybody that had a job in the north or even in the middle area, all of them had been displaced. Many of them were staying in tents or were staying in the hospital, and they all were sharing the same story. They had been working, serving their patients, and then out of nowhere, their hospital is surrounded. There's tanks there. There are these quadcopter drones with AR-15s connected to them, with microphones on them and speakers saying, "Get out now before it's too late. Get out." And so they had some really harrowing stories. I mean, many of these nurses in the ICU told me that they had to leave their patients, that they were told that the Palestinian Red Crescent or that the International Committee of the Red Cross would be allowed to evacuate those patients. And that did not materialize. And so they were all so traumatized about their experiences. And I had met even people who had been detained by the Israeli military as while they were working in the hospital and trying to evacuate, and detained for 2 or 3 weeks. And the things that they endured, torture, humiliation, being left without any sort of food, that was really hard to hear. And yet they were in the hospital trying to serve their people, trying to do what they could at that time. But I tell you, it was really, really hard to hear those stories.
You work in the emergency room or have in Chicago. So I imagine, that you have seen a lot of stuff. Just having gone to an emergency room in Brooklyn at times, I can only imagine what you've seen in Chicago. Tell us what you saw in terms of like patients, in terms of like within this mayhem, what you saw from a medical standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, nothing from my training in Detroit or in my current position now in one of the largest trauma centers in the country, with the busiest trauma center, one of the busiest trauma centers in the country, prepared me for what I saw in Khan Yunis at Nasser Hospital. I mean, it was mayhem. It was mass casualty event after mass casualty event. And a mass casualty event is essentially anytime you have 5 to 10 people that show up at once from a trauma incident. And from day one, when we showed up in Khan Yunis, what we saw was that this hospital was overcrowded, it was under-resourced, and that their providers were overworked. And we saw waves of patients that would come through the emergency department. You would hear a bomb, whether it's tank shelling or an F-35 airstrike, or you even hear exchange of gunfire. You could hear it from the hospital compound, and you could feel it too. If there was a bomb, the building is shaking, and then the windows feel like that the glass might break at any second. And about 15 to 20 minutes later, you get an influx of these trauma patients. You get 15, 20 people, and they would be rushed in, brought in by their family, because ambulances, it's too risky for them to get to these areas that had just been recently bombed. So you are literally seeing family members wrapping injured people in blankets from their house, rushing to the emergency department. There's no registration, there's no triage, and they're dropping them off at your feet and saying, this just happened 5 minutes ago. We were at this place, we're this far away. Many of them were dead on arrival. Many of them were clearly, they had succumbed to their injuries right away from the airstrike or from the collapse of a house. And some of them were really critically injured. And so you got to get down. You are literally treating patients on the floor because there are no more hospital carts. They're all occupied by other trauma patients or sick people in the hospital. And it was really tough because, at least I feel like in the emergency department in the States, in Chicago, it's controlled chaos. I mean, we've got public safety, we've got a bunch of nurses, we have nice private rooms. At Nasser Hospital, the family stays right next to you as you're trying to treat the patient. And I mean, can you imagine that scenario where you're trying to treat somebody and they're still alive when they show up, but 15 minutes later, they succumb to their injuries and they're dead. They have been killed by this trauma incident. And you have to look up and stare at their mother or their father or their kids, I mean, and tell them, hey, we did everything we could. There's nothing we can do from here. And that happened day in and day out in Khan Yunis, in Nasser Hospital. And I was there only for 3 weeks. I could not imagine my other colleagues that were there who have been doing this for 4 months. They've had to deal with this for 4 months, and I could feel their burnout. I could feel how stressful it was. And if this patient survives, it's not the end of the story. If we were able to miraculously get them up to an operating room or to an ICU, many of them would die days later or weeks later, either from an infection because their leg was blown off or because it was so severe their lungs couldn't handle it and they couldn't breathe anymore and they'd suffocate to death. I mean, this was a common experience. And I want to add one more thing just to kind of paint the picture. I was there during the longest interruption of telecommunications. For 8 days, Sam, I didn't have signal on my phone. I couldn't communicate with my family. I couldn't communicate with anybody else. In fact, in the hospital, we were using intercoms to call each other, the doctors to call each other. And I remember this specific patient that we had who was in the ICU, who had died. And ICU visiting hours in Khan Yunis at Nasser Hospital was between 12 and 12:30. And so his family had visited him at 12. Overnight, he dies. And then the next day, his dad shows up and doesn't see his son in the room anymore. And he says, where's my son? Where did he go? And we had to break it to his father a day later, after his son was already in the morgue and being prepared for burial, that his son had died in the process. And you can imagine the father said, why didn't anybody tell me? Why hasn't anybody told me about this? Why didn't you tell me he might die? And he wasn't really angry at the physicians, but it just, that tragedy of not even being able to tell a loved one when somebody has passed away, they have to show up the next day and randomly find out. I mean, that sort of shock and that pain, I can't get the image of that father out of my mind. I mean, it's really, really tough, the circumstances that people have been placed in. And it feels like every aspect of life has been under attack. And you definitely felt it in a hospital where you think that there would be some sort of reprieve. I mean, the doctors were short on food. There would be days that I would walk over to wash my hands after treating a patient, and I try to turn the faucet on, and nothing is coming out. And then there would be days where you know that there are people coming in who you might have had a chance. If you just had the supplies that day, if you had the antibiotics that day, you might have been able to give them a chance. I mean, I don't think, I think this is like sort of a post-apocalyptic World War II sort of scene there. And it's something that I think I would love to elevate some of these stories so people can at least picture what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult for people to sort of like get a grip on just that type of reality, to wrap their heads around this. Let's talk about, you mentioned, lack of water, and right now the death tally is, supposedly 30,000. It is probably far higher because there's a lot of people who have not been rescued, or I should say, found. Yeah. But when we're talking about like that is ostensibly right from Israeli bombardment or firing of weapons. Like, do we have a sense of if you need dialysis, if you you have some type of chronic disease, or or you're a kid and you get some type of like respiratory infection? Do we have a sense of how many people die because there's no ability, just the sort of like the standard illness that people have that in other circumstances would more or less be treated? How do we have a sense, or do you have a sense, or how much of that did you come across?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that we're not going to be able to assess that accurately until much, much later. But the World Health Organization has already made that point that you just made, is that they suspect that more people will die after the war from the lack of water, from the lack of food, from the lack of proper, water and sanitation facilities. They are suspecting that, and we experienced that firsthand. I can tell you anecdotally, we saw many, many children who were suffering from diarrheal illnesses because there is no way that they can properly wash their hands. And in fact, we talked about what was the healthcare situation prior to October 7th. We know from almost every international organization that has been working on the ground with respect to water and sanitation that 95% of the water in the Gaza Strip was not fit for human consumption. And so after the war, we know that the 3 waste treatment centers in the Gaza Strip are essentially not functioning. They're not able to clean the water that's there. We know that the groundwater wells that many people rely on, many of them have been damaged or destroyed. And many of them have now, because of the bombing, have had the water contaminated. So it's definitely not fit for human consumption. And we know that the people in the Gaza Strip right now are living off of 1.5 liters of water a day. To put that into context, before the October 7th, they were living off of around 90 liters of water a day. And this is for everything: washing, eating. I mean, you're talking about water for everyday life. What are we doing? What are we using in the States? We're above 300 liters per household per day. That's in the States. So right now we're asking the people of Gaza Strip to live off of 1.5 liters. And that number is the same in Israel, by the way. It's around 300 liters per household per day. And it's just, you're talking about people have access to more than 250 times of water that are less than 5 miles away from the Gaza Strip, less than 10 miles away. So this is definitely a major, major concern when we're talking about water and food. And it's something that every single person in the Gaza Strip right now, the 2.3 million people, all of them are at risk. These are not my words. Just yesterday, 15 organizations, Action Against Hunger, the World Food Program, Save the Children, Oxfam, are all saying that the water and food crisis is catastrophic and that it's being used as a weapon. Starvation is being used as a weapon. And of course, I'm not an expert in law. I'm not a lawyer, but of course, everybody knows that this is against international law and that this is something that should never be a consequence of war. And yet everybody in the Gaza Strip is in that position. I'll share with you just one image from Rafah when I was there for briefly. And it's that there are all of these tents and families that are sheltering in these tents. And what they do is they look for a pickup truck. And on the back of that pickup truck, there's a barrel of water that somebody was able to get from right where the border is. There's like this Emirati water plant that they hooked up a pipeline into Rafah on the Gaza side. So they're on the Egyptian side, they're bringing water into the Gaza side. And so these pickup trucks will try to fill up water in this big barrel, and then they'll drive around the camps, and people will come out of their tents with these small containers, and they want to fill up water. And you see the line will extend 50, 60 people. And that water, that barrel of water, runs out by the time they get to the 25th or the 26th person. So half of those people don't get water. They go home into their tents, or they go into their tents with these empty containers. It's not just about being able to drink that water. You're talking about them being at risk of communicable diseases because they cannot wash their hands. They cannot do any of the sanitary things that they would like to do. And on top of that, these tents and this area is so crowded. I spoke to a physician whose family was in a tent, and he told me his elderly mother, if she needed to go to the bathroom, the nearest outhouse was 15-minute walk from where she was. And so, you're prohibiting people from being able to access these sanitary facilities. It's not just about not being able to use the bathroom. It's a public health disaster.
Give us a sense. I mean, you say that, people were at Nasser Hospital. They were camping out there with the idea that this is like the one safe zone. And, we're on the brink of of Rafah perhaps being fully assaulted by the Israelis. Of course, like, a city or a town that was 200,000 or 300,000 people is now 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million people. All the sheer density is astonishing. But how much was the hospital under assault? Are you still in touch? While you were there, and do you have a sense of like what's happened since?
Yeah, I mean, day one, when I would look outside of the window of the room that I was sleeping in the hospital, I could see the bombing take place. I could see smoke rising from about 10 blocks away. And of course, being from the US and working in a hospital, I was already very uncomfortable with that. I mean, it was so loud that you could hear it, and you can hear the gunfire going back and forth. As the days went on, that bombing became closer and closer. And it was clear that the Israeli military was planning on clearing Khan Yunis, just like they did with Deir el-Balah, just like they did with Gaza City, just like they did with Jabalia. So it was clear that the military was moving from the north to the south. And I'm only saying that as an observer, not as a military expert. But it was getting closer and closer. There was one day where somebody had told me, hey, you might be able to capture signal if you go outside of the emergency department and just hold your phone up towards the sky. And so as I'm walking around holding my phone up, the hospital wall gets hit with a spray of bullets. And I just went immediately back inside the emergency department. And I was like, this is getting way too close. We're talking now, maybe it's 2 or 3 blocks away. There was 2 particular nights where I was convinced that the hospital was going to be hit and that I may be killed in the process. And it was clear that the tanks were rolling in. I didn't recognize the sound. It took the other physicians to tell me, do you hear that rolling sound? That's the tank that's rolling very close to the hospital. And then they showed me the lights of the tank outside, and I could see the tank rolling, and it got right outside the wall of the medical complex. And then I saw the tanks roll over a cemetery that was there. And in fact, we had, I couldn't really see it from my window. I could just see a lot of kind of dirt getting into the sky. And people had told me essentially some of the bodies in the cemetery were being taken by the military, which was something that was common. And I still don't have an explanation for that. But that's how close we were able to see where the military was. And you can hear the F-35 overhead, and it felt literally like they were about to land on top of the hospital. And then you would hear a whistling noise as soon as you heard the F-35, and you knew that a missile was flying down and getting ready to hit. And honestly, I don't know why I was doing this. Maybe it was an instinct, or, it's just kind of this sort of reflex, but I was closing my eyes every time you would hear that missile blowing, just not sure if it was going to hit the hospital or not. And I thought maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's just because I'm, this American doctor who's used to being in a safe place, who's used to being protected. So I left my room and I was walking around. I went to the ICU. I went to the emergency department, and all of the doctors felt exactly the same way. I mean, the tenseness was in their shoulders. And I had realized they were so quiet. And as I'm trying to talk to them, they were re-traumatized. Many of these people had come from Shifa Hospital, had come from Al-Auda Hospital, had come from Kamal Adwan Hospital, and had already experienced this one time. And I remember foolishly telling them, I remember sitting there talking to the ICU doctor and saying, I think the hospital should be okay. I came through the World Health Organization. Med Global is a part of one of the World Health Organization's emergency medical teams. They tasked me here. And he looked at me and he right away responded. He said, what makes you think this hospital is any different than any of those other hospitals? What makes you think that this hospital is safe? It's safe until it's not safe anymore. And we know that it's not going to be safe anymore the second we see that we are raided, or that we're arrested, or that we're bombed. And I think for him, this was just another sort of, it was just another phase of whatever is going on, this military operation. And he fully expected that after he flees to Rafah, which he did over the next course of a week, that it would happen in Rafah at the 3 hospitals that were in Rafah, Abu Yusuf al-Najjar Hospital or the European Hospital. There was no doubt in his mind that those hospitals were next. And I spoke yesterday to one of the surgeons that was still in the hospital, and he had told me that their quadcopter had shown up, that they had essentially been told that they needed to evacuate, that there were around 300 healthcare workers, that there were 350 patients in the hospital, and there were still 5,000 to 7,000 people displaced who were sheltering inside of the hospital. And then he told me, they're telling us to evacuate, but 3 people tried to leave the premises. They tried to walk out of the front entrance of the hospital and head south, and they were hit by snipers, all 3 of them. He said, I operated on one of them. I needed to operate on one of them. So I'm not sure, what sort of situation is going to unfold at Nasser Hospital, I just know, based on speaking to the staff that are still there and based on witnessing what I witnessed, that it's going to be a massacre there. I mean, there's no doubt in any of the people that are there that something very bad is going to unfold at Nasser Hospital. And it's just a repeat of the previous hospitals and healthcare infrastructure places that have been attacked.
You mentioned the trauma of your fellow medical workers there. What of how much exposure did you have to children, both those that were brought in with injuries and medical problems, but in the surrounding area? I mean, what do you have a sense of what it's like for a child to have to live in that environment?
Yeah, I have a few things I'd like to share about that, because I think that's such an important question. I think, we're talking about a generation that's been traumatized and that I think is going to, I don't know if they'll ever be able to recover from this. The first would like to start with, we know that how many, out of all of the people that have been killed, whether it's 27,000 or probably going to reach well above 35,000, as you mentioned, we know that 70% of them were women and children. And I can tell you, just working in the resuscitation bay of the emergency department at Nasser, that those numbers seem pretty accurate to me. I remember one of the nights that a house was hit and a family brought in 10 people, and 3 of them were young girls between the ages of 10 and 14, all of them dead on arrival. And I remember one of the fathers asking me, please keep working, please try to save her. And it was very clear that there was nothing that I could do. And you're sitting there and you're just watching a family, a mother and a father, mourn the loss of their daughter, but also you just realize their house was bombed. So what are they going to do? I mean, they wrap up their daughter, they go and bury her, and then they look for a place that they can shelter. I mean, there's not even a second to think about what's happened. On top of that, you walk through Nasser Hospital, there are children everywhere. I mean, I remember going through the pediatric ward and seeing kids playing Ring Around the Rosie in the middle of the hospital hallway. And you'd see 5 or 6 of them. And then once that's over, they're going back to the corner of the hallway where they have a mattress with their family and they're sitting there. It's, it's really, really tough to mention this part. But that night when I was looking outside at the tanks, when I was at Nasser Hospital and we had become surrounded, there was a significant amount of panic in the tents that were outside closest to where that tank was. And I remember looking outside the window and seeing families rushing to grab whatever they could. And they were planning on walking to Rafah from Khan Yunis in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I mean, just incredibly dangerous. And the thing that you see is you see a bunch of these kids just standing outside, watching their father, watching their mother grab whatever they could, and they're about to hit the road. And you hear the bombs dropping around them, and they hear the gunfire being exchanged. And you're sitting there, and you're like, how are they supposed to understand this? They're not able to go to school. They're not able to go back to their house. They're not able to play with their friends outside. They're not able to have any sort of regular, normal life. Every part of their life has been affected. And then in addition to that, you're talking about they don't have enough food. I mean, those 15 organizations that talked about the starvation, they said every family, every person in Gaza is skipping meals. Everybody's skipping meals there, including the kids. I mean, so these kids are hungry. Some of them don't have shoes or winter clothes or socks. Many of them have witnessed people in their family or friends being killed or traumatized. They're victims of amputees. You see many of them who have fled 4 or 5 times. I mean, before the war, I always bring this up, but before the war, there was a mental health assessment, and they said 70% of the kids in the Gaza Strip who had been born in the last 10 years needed some sort of mental health intervention. What's going to happen after the war, Sam? I mean, all of these kids have been traumatized. Nobody has been untouched in the Gaza Strip. And I don't even want to mention all of the kids who have suffered injuries, who need specialized care, who are waiting to be transferred out of the Gaza Strip somewhere. We know 6,000 people are waiting in Gaza to go to another medical facility outside of Gaza so they can get treatment. How many of them are children who will die? How many of them have been approved to leave, but their parents weren't allowed to leave, so they're stuck in the Gaza Strip? I know many cases like that where, hey, your mom and dad are not allowed to accompany you on this trip to Egypt or to Qatar or to Turkey to get the medical treatment that you need. So how are they supposed to send them? They don't speak the language. They may not speak the language of the place that they're going to. They're probably 5 or 6 years old. How are they supposed to go and get the medical treatment that they need? I mean, when I say that this is a 360-degree assault on life in Gaza Strip, any way that you look at this in any direction or perspective, there's something catastrophic going on. The humanitarian crisis is the worst that we've seen since World War II. And the majority, you took all of the conflicts in the last 3 years, all of the war zones, and you combined all of the children that have tragically been killed in those war zones, it doesn't even amount to half of the victims that we've seen in the Gaza Strip over the course of 4 months. I mean, that's the level of violence these kids are being exposed to. And I don't know how they'll ever be able to recover from that, let alone how we'll be able to access and provide them with the care that they need after the war, the day after the war.
You mentioned there's a 6,000 person waiting list. How is that? How do you? What is that process? I mean, are there people who are actually able to get out of Gaza for healthcare? I would imagine that that's incredibly restricted, because I would imagine that if I was there with my family, I would be attempting to, I don't know, to escape in some fashion, because it's just being closed in, and there's a sense. And we should say, I guess apparently at the moment that the evacuation or the expulsion of Nasser Hospital has just been ordered and is ongoing right now. But how does that process work, where people who need immediate, urgent health care, how does that process work?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because it's something that I had a tough time figuring out while I was there on the ground. Essentially what happens is you are treated by a doctor who says, okay, the things that you need, we can't provide for you. So here's an official recommendation. Here's the official paperwork that we're going to submit to the health ministry, to submit to the Egyptians and the Israelis, that you need to be transferred out. It has all of your information on there. We know that number is above 6,000. I would probably say it's 6,500, but we know that so far to date, over the 4 months, that around 600 of those people have been allowed to exit. And what happens is every single day around 9 a.m., a list is produced by the Israelis and given to the Egyptians, and saying, this is the list of people who are approved to be medically evacuated from the Gaza Strip. On the day that I left the Gaza Strip back into Egypt, on the bus that I was on, 8 people of these medical evacuees were on there. And the average per day is between 7 and 10 medical evacuees. And so we know that if you have 6,000, and that you're talking about 6 or 7 of them are leaving a day, or 10 of them on a great day, 10 of them are being able to leave, then we know that there's going to be unnecessary excess mortality. People are going to die waiting for this. And there are several people with stories who said, we were waiting for this to happen. And the most vulnerable out of all of these patients are going to be the young children. We're talking about infants, neonates, people under 6 months who are waiting for whatever reason to get that specialized care. They will die waiting. Now, let's say that you don't get approved. Let's say that you have somebody who you desperately needs medical care. You're still waiting on the list. There is an alternative. That alternative is you can go to the Egyptian border and you can pay an Egyptian officer between 10 and 13,000 US dollars, and then you'll be able to get out. And that's something that's prohibitively expensive. It's something that barely anybody in the Gaza Strip is able to do, especially at this point. And anybody who was able to do that did that very early on during this war. They're not able to do that anymore. So, I mean, this is why
you're basically bribing a customs official or something like that to get across. And we should say, unemployment was at 50% 5 months ago. I would imagine nobody's getting paid really in any type of sort of like a black market type of situation there, right? I mean, the entire society at this point is completely been just completely fractured.
100%. I mean, that's such an important point. Nobody's getting paid. The entire infrastructure, the civilian infrastructure has collapsed. And what you see on the street, if you're walking, you see people who've kind of posted up. They're selling the aid that they've received to get something else that they need. So they're bartering. I mean, if you have a can of tuna and you need feminine hygiene products, you're trying to see if you can make that trade. I mean, that's how desperate the situation has come. I do also want to mention that there is this sort of black market that exists where some of these products are getting in and being sold. Of course, it's insanely inflated. It's coming in from the Egyptian side. And then one example is diapers. Diapers for around 12 diapers. It used to cost 20 shekels, which is, $8. Right now, you can't find that same packet of diapers. It's 4 times the cost, 80 something shekels. So, almost 15, 20 bucks. And that's something that you can see, you can find it, but barely anybody can afford this. Nobody really has anything that they're getting paid. So people are tapping into their life savings. And many of them at this point have run out of their money. I mean, just because of the basic necessities that they need and it being inflated and so high during this wartime. I mean, people have essentially run out of money. And that's when you start to really worry about what sort of happens. Because up until this point, I think the Palestinian people have been so resilient, and you can actually walk through Rafah and you see that the only thing that's holding this society together is that sort of dignity and sort of that resilience that they have. They're able to figure out who needs aid the most, and it's leaders from each family that's deciding, okay, you can get this aid, you can get this blanket, you can get this tent because you desperately need it or you have a lot of kids. If we keep pushing them to the brink of collapse, I'm just very concerned about what happens to people. I'm very concerned about when, they've done things, we know this. The Palestinians have resorted to looking at animal feed, sorting out all of the dirt that they could and using that as food. They are in a very desperate situation, especially in the north of Gaza. And so I'm very concerned about what happens.
What about pregnant women at this point? I mean, what is happening with pregnant? I imagine there's no prenatal, postnatal care at this. How are babies being delivered?
Yeah, this is a population of people who are being totally neglected. They're being asked to just show up when they're in labor. They'll go to the closest health access point or to a hospital. There's really only one obstetric hospital that's able to deliver patients and perform C-sections. And those hospitals are so overcrowded that one of the doctors that I met who was pregnant and had delivered her son had a C-section and was asked 4 hours later to get up and go back to her tent because they needed that bed. 4 hours after a C-section, that's insane. Here in the States, we ask our patients who have C-sections to stay in bed for, 5 days so that they don't have any sort of trauma to the area where they had the surgery. And we know that there's an increased amount of stillborn births, miscarriages, complications from these obstetric complications. We know that they're not getting the prenatal vitamins that they're supposed to be getting. They're not getting the screening that they're supposed to be getting in their first or second trimester. And we know that many of them are even delivering in their tents with, local experienced women, or if there's a midwife that happens to be in that internally displaced camp. And of course, you can imagine if you're delivering inside of the tent, what are you using to cut the umbilical cord? What are you using to wash the newborn baby? What are we giving the mothers? There was this really tragic video that came out about a newborn baby, and the mother was trying to breastfeed him. And she said, I just don't have enough milk because I'm not getting enough food. So she had grabbed a date and had put this wrap around it and put it in the baby's mouth so that he could try to suck some of the juice from the date. And that's one story. Imagine the mother who's unable to breastfeed her child. She's desperately searching for formula milk, and that we know is very, very much in short supply. It's not entering the Gaza Strip as much as it needs, and that puts over 5,000 kids under the age of 6 months at risk who are depending on this formula feed. That's it. Again, I feel like this is a part of the sort of the hidden tragedy, the things that we are not able to really hear about as much. It's, you're talking about pregnant patients and neonates, but even people with heart disease or diabetes or kids with cystic fibrosis, or they have other pediatric diseases. All of them are being neglected, and none of those non-communicable disease medicines are entering into the Gaza Strip. I can tell you countless amounts of people who were begging me when I leave if I could potentially look for over-the-counter medications that would make a difference. There's an over-the-counter vitamin for a disease that's affecting 15 people in the Gaza Strip, 15 kids in the Gaza Strip. It's this genetic disease that they have, and all they need is this vitamin that's available everywhere. And I remember the doctor coming up to me and said, if you can get us 50 of these vitamins, if you can get us 50 pills, you will be saving the lives of these 15 kids. And I had to leave the Gaza Strip, and I don't know if they were ever able to get those vitamins, and I don't know what became of those kids that are suffering from that genetic disease. And so, this is truly something that I think long after this war is over, we're going to keep peeling back the layers of this tragedy, the layers of the horrifying thing that the people in the Gaza Strip are dealing with.
Lastly, UNRWA, give us a sense of like how devastating the Senate just passed a part of like an aid package, military, really a weapons package, a prohibition on funding UNRWA.
Yeah.
Contextualize for us, like how devastating is that within the context of Gaza that UNRWA is unable or will soon run out of its capacity to help people there?
You know, these 9 or 10 countries that decided to pause the funding to UNRWA, and that bill that came out that was passed by the Senate recently, I mean, this is insanity. I mean, I don't understand, what sort of disconnect the people who are making these decisions are dealing with. I mean, you are talking essentially about cutting off the lifeline to 2.3 million people in the Gaza Strip, all of whom are dependent on what UNRWA does. All of them rely on the aid of UNRWA being distributed. In the north, one of the few aid agencies that has been able to access the north of Gaza has been UNRWA. And actually, 3 or 4 days ago, one of their trucks came under fire as they were trying to deliver the aid. UNRWA has over 165 shelters, 4 times over capacity right now in the Gaza Strip. I mean, you can walk into one of these shelters and there's no way that you could take 10 steps without bumping into somebody. They're distributing meals to those people. They're distributing whatever medications they're able to get. They're providing them shelter. UNRWA is providing life to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip right now. And to talk about which are very serious allegations about these 12 employees that may have participated in October 7th. I understand that. But to pause funding, I mean, this is insanity. It's sadistic. It's cruel. It's callous. And there is no way that you can justify doing that to the entire population of the Gaza Strip, to all of the Palestinians that are living there. UNRWA was a refuge during the war. I mean, literally, all you would do is ask, where is the UNRWA shelter in Khan Yunis? Or where is UNRWA's buildings in Rafah? And you would go there and you would try to find a place to stay. Nobody would turn you away. All you had to do was find a corner that you and your family could sleep in. And now we're talking about cutting off and pausing funding and not being able for them to be able to resume their services past February. I mean, what do we expect to happen? This is all happening while there are military operations being conducted, while the last most densely populated spot in Gaza and Rafah is being attacked, and there's going to be a military offensive there. We're talking about stopping funding for an aid agency that is on the ground. I can't imagine how they made this decision. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's so infuriating because what is the alternative here? There is nobody else that can do UNRWA's work on the ground. All of the agencies combined that are working in the Gaza Strip cannot do what UNRWA does on a daily basis. We are not going to be able to make up what they do. And instead, we're talking about shutting them down totally, dismantling this aid agency in the midst of one of the worst humanitarian crises and a very tough war that's taking place with no end in sight. I mean, I don't know when there's going to be a ceasefire. The future looks bleak already, and UNRWA is operating. What about when UNRWA is done? So, this is something that all of these people who are making these decisions have to be held accountable for this. I mean, you are participating in this humanitarian crisis. You are essentially a part of the problem. You're not a part of the solution.
I know as you either entered or exited from Rafah, you saw huge lines of vehicles with aid. What is inhibiting those from getting in?
I didn't get a straightforward answer, so I'll just tell you what I think. We know that prior to the war, the Gaza Strip needed 500 of these trucks entering. That's what it took to sustain one day in the Gaza Strip. You needed 500 trucks to enter. During the war, the first 3 weeks, that number was 0. We know that it was totally cut off. Since then, we're at the highest level of trucks entering per day, and that number is at about 100 of these trucks. Talking to the leaders on the ground who are a part of these aid agencies, they're saying we need 1,000 of those trucks during this wartime. All right. What I know is that these trucks show up in Egypt and they get inspected 5 or 6 times. Then they get sent to Israel to be inspected one last time at the Karam Shalom crossing. And instead of entering into the Gaza Strip, most of these trucks are sent back to Egypt and then asked to cross into Rafah from Egypt. And so part of the problem is that entire process is this bottleneck that doesn't allow the appropriate amount of trucks to enter. And then the other part of this, where there is a delay, is that during some of these inspections, many of the things that are supposed to enter are suddenly told, hey, this is prohibited from entering. And I'll give you one example from the medical world. We have plenty of people with fractures of bones, plenty of people who fractured their jaws or their vertebrae, and they need screws and plates, metal screws and metal plates to repair those injuries. That is prohibited from entering, whether it's from Israel or from Egypt. It's prohibited from entering. Since the start of the war, people with those injuries have not been able to have those surgeries, and those trucks are sitting outside of the border waiting to enter. For whatever reason, those kinds of things that for medical supplies are not allowed to enter. They're on this list of things that cannot enter. And that goes down to food items as well, too. There are certain food items that are not allowed to enter. If you talk to the Egyptians, they say it's the Israelis that are stopping this. And if you talk to the Israelis, they're saying it's the Egyptians. And if you ask me, it's both of them. I mean, they're both a part of the problem of getting stuff inside.
I guess lastly, what can people who are listening, what can we do? I mean, I think, aside from trying to agitate on our own country to, use its leverage for a ceasefire and to allow UNRWA to, at least attempt to fulfill its task. Like, what else can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's going to require multiple things. I think, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share some of the stories of these Palestinians that are on the ground in the Gaza Strip. I think that's important. I think there's been this sort of campaign to dehumanize some of the people in the Gaza Strip. We get lost in the numbers. And the more that we're able to share their stories and their plights on our social media platforms or with programs like the Majority Report, I think that makes a difference. I think additionally, being able to support organizations that are on the ground, whether it's financially or volunteering with them, that makes a huge difference. It goes a very, very long way. Finally, all of these different actions, just calling for people to mobilize, whether it's a protest in front of the American Medical Association, like that's taking place today in Chicago, or it's asking your union to call for a ceasefire. I think all of these things matter. The Chicago City Council passed a resolution supporting a ceasefire. I think that makes a difference, especially knowing that the DNC is coming to town in the summer in Chicago. I think them understanding that a city like Chicago, the people want a ceasefire, I think that's important. And finally, and I've dealt with this with my own elected officials, I'm not political, so you have to excuse some of my ignorance, but just kind of demanding that they do better. I mean, I talked to my senators in Illinois, as well as my congressmen. They all they're going to be supporting this bill, the aid package that's been placed. They definitely are supporting the war. But I want them to also answer for the humanitarian crisis that's taking place. Okay, I get it. You want to support the war. There's nothing I can say to convince you otherwise. Maybe you're getting, some donations from somewhere that's swaying you this way. I want you to make a difference on the ground. I mean, the Jordanians are doing airdrops in Gaza of medical supplies. The U.S. can do that. The French are sending floating ships to the Gaza Strip and the Mediterranean so that people can be taken care of. The U.S. can do that. I mean, we can play a vital role, I think, in alleviating some of the suffering that's taking place in Gaza. And of course, a ceasefire is the most necessary step. But I don't see a lot of motivation in our country from our elected officials to really take a stance. So I want to hold them accountable for every aspect that's taking place here, and I want them to try and make a difference. And so I think there's plenty of ways that we can do something, and I hope that soon that there can be some sort of resolution. I hope that there can be some sort of reprieve. And I know, I'll tell you, the people in the Gaza Strip were more optimistic than I am. Just speaking to them on a daily basis, there was a rumor that a ceasefire was taking place while I was there. As I was leaving in Rafah, there was a rumor that, hey, there's a 30-day ceasefire. And Sam, you should have seen the streets. I mean, people celebrating, kids whistling, people hugging each other. It was so tragic to find out that this was just a rumor that had spread through the camps that, ultimately was not the case. And I think about those people celebrating in the streets now that there might be a military offensive taking place in Rafah. And I want us to be able to do whatever we can and shout as loud as we can to people who will listen to us that please, let's stop another chapter in this humanitarian crisis and tragedy taking place. And I hope something can give.
I don't think that people realize I certainly hadn't heard about the French, floating support or Jordanian airdrops. I mean, I think I don't know that, people are even aware that can take place. And so that is, it's helpful to know that, at least in terms of what we can demand of our government. What organizations on the ground do you think that people should be looking toward to provide support to?
Yeah, I mean, there's many of them. I'll mention, of course, Med Global is the organization I work with. They have an office in Gaza Strip. The Palestinian American Medical Association is on the ground. ANERA, ANERA, does incredible work with food and shelter and hygiene products. There is also PCRF, the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. There is, of course, UNICEF and UNRWA. UNRWA is looking for donations now from people. I mean, of course, they're doing incredible work. So anybody that's on the ground, I would say that's what I would caution listeners. There's a lot of people who are going to try to, collect funds and donations for the Gaza Strip. Just look for who's on the ground, who has an office there, who was operating before the war. Those are the people that are on the ground. They have credibility with the population that's in the Gaza Strip, and they know where the aid needs to go.
Dr. Thayer Ahmad, Emergency Room Physician Assistant Program Director at the Advocate Christ Emergency Medical Residency Program, and obviously working with Med Global. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and just really admire the work that you've done. And my heart goes out to you, and obviously everyone that you had to work with and there. But thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break and head into the fun half of the program. Just remember, you can support this show by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. ESVN, Bradley.
Yes, so we broke down the Super Bowl on Monday, and I have to fulfill tomorrow my punishment for losing the betting contest between me and Emma by one outcome and by a half point. So I'm going to drink a sampling of a bunch of really gross flavored sodas that Kowalski sent to this office. So youtube.com/ESVN show to check that out tomorrow if you'd like to see me be punished.
Left Reckoning, Matt.
Last night we had Igor Kotkin on, a Russian socialist, talking about his reaction to Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin's long face-to-face. Check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
All right, see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you. And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder, the Majority Report. It is the supposedly fun half. Emma Vigeland out today. Matt and Bradley are here. Let's have some good news. Angela from Alberta. Hi, Sam. Can I have a shofar for getting my cancer screening back negative this morning? The preventative treatment 6 months ago worked.
Congrats.
Tomo Flink, happy Friends Day Wednesday, folks. To all the centrists who described Israel and Palestine as complicated, if you're wondering that what you would have said and done during this U.S. civil rights movement or Nazi Germany, you're saying and doing it now. All right, let's play these clips. I mean, that interview with Theramad is obviously just incredibly disturbing, both in terms of what he saw. I mean, even just in that he's carrying that around too, I find difficult to contemplate. But here is an interview with Israeli government spokesman Ilan Levy on Channel 4's On with Channel 4's Krishnan Guru Murthy. And I mean, again, even if we stipulate that 12 individuals out of the literally thousands that work,
tens of thousands
for UNRWA, were involved in the October 7th attack, it is just unconscionable that governments would stop funding this UN aid organization at a time where there is such overwhelming suffering, historical levels of suffering that are taking place in Gaza right now. But then to even contemplate that this has all just been a lie and a mechanism in which to make the Palestinian people suffer more is even more grotesque. Here is the Israeli government spokesperson being questioned as to whether they actually have evidence of their assertion.
There were huge consequences as a result of your naming of people who worked for UNRWA. What the world has not seen is the accompanying evidence. I just want to know, is there accompanying evidence? Is there anything beyond those names? And have you shared it with the United Nations investigation that is going on? Because there is millions of pounds of aid that is resting on those claims and hundreds of thousands of lives dependent on it.
When we said that UNRWA, at least 13 UNRWA staff members, and that's apart from the thousands of UNRWA graduates, but the 13 UNRWA staff members were directly involved in the October 7th massacre. That was the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, do you have any evidence for that?
Complicity and collusion. Of
Because
course, because this was all collected. Because this was all collected on the basis of intelligence that has been shared with our allies. Intelligence that has been shared with our allies.
When was it shared with Britain? Because Britain claimed it didn't know.
I can't speak to the specific intelligence that has been shared with individual Western partners, but that evidence is out there. It is clear.
Is
It is
there
not
direct
deflection.
evidence about those 13 names? Where is it? Have you passed it to the UN investigation or not?
We do not trust the UN investigation that is taking place.
So there is no evidence that you have placed in front of anybody investigating this.
The United Nations, which has been covering up the Hamas presence literally 20 meters underneath the UN headquarters in Gaza, cannot be trusted to conduct any sort of internal review.
Have you given the evidence
UN is part
to the US or British governments?
I'm not personally aware of what material may have been passed on between our intelligence agencies.
I mean, Channel 4 already got hold of that document. And the fact that no one will even assert that there is further evidence, or I should say evidence, not assertions, but nobody will even assert as to the existence of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think gives you an indication of just how much BS this is. And let's also be clear: these people were fired by by UNRWA because UNRWA thought this is a way to get out ahead of this story, to make sure that we protect our ability to provide assistance to the Palestinian people. And it was I guess a tactical or strategic mistake on their part to not force Israel to substantiate these claims. I mean, you can't blame them. I don't know how I would react in that situation.
Well, you know that gambit when you're cornered and you say, look over there. I mean, you're never really expected to substantiate your distraction. You just meant it as a distraction. And we got the ICJ ruling that actually this is plausibly a genocide and the world should look at that. And Israel said, look over there, look at UNRWA. And that's what happened.
Yep. This is from a couple of days ago. This is from over the weekend. But it gives you a sense of, and look, you know, the reality of this is that, you know, for some of us, this is a prominent daily sort of awareness of what is going on in Gaza. It's quite clear how much of an atrocity this is. You know, broadly speaking, for the American public, I don't think it's as prominent on their minds as one we think, or certainly would hope. And on some level, you know, I guess my experience during the Iraq War informs that, because certainly, you know, by 2005, maybe 2000, certainly by 2006, you know, we were, as a country, directly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, at a minimum. And to walk around by the time you get to 2006, nobody, you wouldn't even know that we were fighting a war. Many people attribute the election, the Democrats winning in Congress in 2006 to an anti-war sentiment. There certainly was an anti-war sentiment, but it really had to do with the fact that there was a child predator scandal that the Republicans were covering up. Having covered that myself. But so on top of the natural inclination for the American public to not really give a crap about these things, we also have a news media that is either biased in some instances, or really in many instances just woefully ignorant. Shocking. The shocking part is not the level of the ignorance. The shocking part is the existence of the ignorance in a way that I think would surprise people. I mean, incompetence is more often than not the answer to, you know, the question of, like, stupid or evil. It's more often than not, it's stupid. It's ignorance, which is shocking in and of itself. And I can tell you, as somebody who came from a different profession, to come into this, and which I don't even perceive to be, we do journalism here, but it's this is some form of infotainment. I was shocked to understand the level of historical and contextual knowledge that people who work in the news media, not all, but a lot.
Yeah. Here
is MSNBC correspondent Matt Bradley, really probably an NBC correspondent, on with MSNBC's Alex Witt. And this is, play the tape.
So we are covering all of the angles of this story with reports from Israel and analysis here stateside. Let's go first to NBC's Matt Bradley joining us from Tel Aviv. Matt, welcome. What is this situation like in Rafah right now? How do you see it?
Well, there's a lot of fear, but there's also a lot of starvation, a lot of homelessness, people living in tents. We're talking about 1.4 million Palestinians who are living on the edge of the Gaza Strip, right where Gaza meets Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. They are about to be pushed, or many of them fear they're about to be pushed from the Gaza Strip into the Sinai Desert. And this is why when you talk to Palestinians there, they keep up bringing this one word, the Nakba. That means catastrophe. And that happened all the way back in 1948. That's the Arabic word for when the Israeli state was created. And Palestinians feel, and this history is still debated, Palestinians feel as though they were forced from their homes. And that is exactly what they think is happening right now, because the Israelis, as you mentioned, Benjamin Netanyahu, he has said that he wants his military to explore or draw up a plan for a evacuation of civilians from Rafah.
Okay. All right. Play that part again, because none of that is debated. The idea that Palestinians just decided to leave, there is no one who has done an hour and a half of reading, watched just a couple of interviews, an interview with a historian. This is not debated. This is not debated by any, I can understand if you're at a bar and you're sitting next to some dude and they turn to you and go it's sort of controversial about whether or not Palestinians, if they were forced to leave. Just, contemplate, just even as the words come out of your mouth, you start to realize, wait a second, why would someone just voluntarily leave their homes that they've been living in? But you could expect that from some dude who's just sitting next to you at a bar, half in the bag. But this is a reporter. He's in Tel Aviv, but he's really making a point too of saying, it's debated. Really? Well, you're a reporter. You're in Tel Aviv. You're covering this. How about you take a half an hour and see how much actual debate there is by scholars, by people like historians. And if you choose not to do that, or you've done it and you're still making the point of the debate, then we get into the evil, stupid type of question. But play this again.
Many of them fear they're about to be pushed from the Gaza Strip into the Sinai Desert. And this is why when you talk to Palestinians there, they keep up bringing this one word, the Nakba. That means catastrophe. And that happened all the way back in 1948. That's the Arabic word for when the Israeli
Pause it
state
for 1 second.
was...
Also, just imagine if someone said the Holocaust, and that happened all the way back in 1945, 1944. I mean, just people would be offended all the way back. You're talking about this like it's second century AD. It's just absurd. All the way back. All right, keep playing.
Them fear they're about to be pushed from the Gaza Strip into the Sinai Desert. And this is why when you talk to Palestinians there, they keep up bringing this one word, the Nakba. That means catastrophe. And that happened all the way back in 1948. That's the Arabic word for when the Israeli state was created, and Palestinians feel, and this history is still debated, Palestinians feel as though they were forced from their homes. And that is exactly what they think is happening right now, because the Israelis...
And it's just not being debated. It's just not being debated. I mean, is it debated? Did we really push the Native Americans, Indians in this country from the land? I mean, did we?
Well, the tough thing is I mean, as you get why a normal person would think these things, because as the sort of general propaganda, well,
that's what I'm pointing. My point is if this dude is sitting next to me in a bar and he says, it's still debated, I'd be like, oh, well, what did you do? Did you watch MSNBC this weekend? Yeah. That's why you think it's still debated. But this guy's sitting in Tel Aviv and he's reporting on it. And he's saying Nakba, and he thinks he's really pushing the envelope here.
And I saw this clip and I noticed that he follows me, and I was thinking maybe it's this dude follows me, and it was maybe some young reporter, and he graduated Duke with an English Lit degree in 2004. So he's been working with the State Department, with the Wall Street Journal. There's no excuse not to have done this research, but you can get through reporting without having grappled with history in any sort of real way.
I mean, look, I don't like to try and guess what's going on in somebody's head, right? But I find it hard to believe if you're going to make the point of it's debated. I'm quite convinced this guy thinks he's going out on a ledge by even saying the words Nakba and telling this story, but has to feel like he has to protect himself by saying, yeah, it's iffy.
Right.
It's iffy. Some people say,
because he got another crack at it. I looked on his Twitter page and he retweeted somebody saying quote tweeting his segment saying him talking about the Nakba correctly. So maybe him getting criticized by people like us gives reporters the license to speak honestly about these sorts of things now. I don't know, but he at least looks somewhat repentant for this.
Okay, that's good. I mean, good for him. And, I imagine Alex Witt also probably knows the history a little bit. You should. Yeah. Oh, we're going to talk to a correspondent from Israel. I'm going to spend, I'm going to spend an hour this week and read Wikipedia.
I mean, if you look at the images, books on the Nakba, the expulsion of people and how they're carrying their belongings in long lines, it looks identical to what we're seeing now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know if I can. Galaxy. The Palestinians just basically say the Nakba was bad vibes, but that's debatable because the Israelis thought it was good vibes. So,
got to hear both sides.
I mean, at least the guy is repentant. And my point is less that this guy, Matt Bradley, is a bad guy. The point is, this is what we're getting in terms of propaganda.
Right.
When Thayer Ahmed, who was just on the show, said Jordan is airlifting and airdropping supplies to Palestinians, that the French are bringing in boats, flotillas, essentially. It sounds like rafts. And I say it sounds like because I haven't been aware of any of this. And I read the coverage from the New York Times. I read the coverage from the Washington Post. I read Haaretz. I read a lot on a daily basis, more than your average person probably on a daily basis about this. And nothing. Now, I don't read European newspapers, but part of the reason why we don't get that information is because it begs the question, hey, wait a second. Why can't we do that? What was the fun clip that you had? Was that with Michael
Rappaport and
watching some
Patrick
insane
Bet-Tape?
dude?
Two insane guys? Oh, no, sorry, august liberal Michael Rappaport.
Let's just play this Michael Cohen clip because it just will. It's sort of a palate cleanser. Look, a lot of people sort of like made a little bit of a hero out of Michael Cohen. I'm not one of those people. I went on and did his podcast.
Oh God, really?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Don't remember this at all.
I was really curious about his book, about how he wrote his book. If you want to go back on that podcast, he lets you ask a question of him because his podcast was called Mea Culpa. It was, and he had a really interesting story about how he wrote his book, which I thought was really interesting and really dramatic in a way. It was almost like history will absolve me. Fidel Castro, like smuggled out the stuff.
This is Long Island. Fidel.
Yeah. The Fidel Castro one, I actually believe is true. Story.
Oh, yeah. I think it's already proven.
Yeah. Let me just leave it at that. In fact, I don't know. Let me put it this way. I have a lot more knowledge, not about the Fidel Castro one, about these things, but be that as it may. So I just want to preface that. But this I'm really enjoying because Donald Trump has come out. He has said that my choice for the RNC head is Whatley, the guy in North Carolina who's a total lunatic, who, of course, all the Republicans are going like, this may not be a great idea. And he goes, and also to make sure that I get every single dime that the RNC raises to pay for my legal defenses, I'm putting in my daughter-in-law, the beautiful Laura Trump. And here's Michael Cohen giving you the backstory. This is one of the few things that I believe that Michael Cohen is saying.
Now, I got to be very clear on this. Laura's an idiot. And I don't say it to be mean. I say it because it's true. In fact, first and foremost, Donald didn't even like her for many, many years. He didn't want Eric to even marry her. He had found somebody else that was working at the Trump organization that he wanted Eric to marry. All right? That's to start.
Pause.
And of
Can
course,
we
not
just
only-
stop right there? Hey, come over here. I want to show you the piece of tail I want you to marry.
Yeah.
This is it. I know you're dating that other one, but this is the one that I want you to.
I'm currently reading Wayne Barrett's Trump, the Greatest Show on Earth, and I'll just say this gels.
Tracks?
Yeah, tracks entirely.
Well, didn't he also do that like with who are the two people working in his office? That his assistant, that woman, I can't remember her name, but Corey Lewandowski, where he's like, she's the best. You're the best piece of tail he's ever gotten. I can't remember what.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
God, we have so many.
I'm still on his divorce in the 80s.
Exactly. Go ahead.
That he wanted Eric to marry. All right, that's to start. And of course, not only did Donald make fun of her looks, but so of course did Don and Ivanka. They all made fun of her looks. They just didn't like her at all. I was at a fundraiser at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C., when Donald finally told the story on what broke the ice between him and Laura Trump. This is a true story. You can't make this stuff up. Even if you tried, you couldn't make it up. He goes on to say that he's watching television and he sees this girl, this blonde, talking about him on television, and it caught his attention. And he's like, whoa, these are like beautiful things. These are incredible, beautiful things. And then he looked and he realized, oh my God, that's my daughter-in-law. That's Laura Trump. And from that moment on, as he called it, it was a love fest. This is a true story. I wish I could make this stuff up. I wish my imagination was that good. He couldn't stand her until she started kissing his ass. Well, what do you do when somebody's kissing your ass? Make them the, co-chair of the RNC. The real question that you have to ask yourself, how over her skis is she as it relates to being a co-chair for the RNC? I mean, how insane is that?
I don't need to hear anymore. I would say that really there's two things that occur to me. One, I love the fact that he didn't recognize her on television until like deep into the conversation.
Oh, blonde.
Oh, yeah, wait a second. And then
Those legs.
I think she should be the head of the RNC.
Yeah.
I why make her co-chair? Let's make her full chair. Total chair. All chair.
And he's right. You can't make that up. It sounds just 100% accurate. And it's crazy, like all that stuff in the 80s, like the Neil Postman amusing ourselves to death, the worried about television. And now we have obviously Trump. Biden is glued to Morning Joe, but with Trump especially, like he was always glued to Fox and Friends, and now he to need his own personal relationship to be validated through him desiring her as mediated through television first and being like, okay, I approve of this woman now.
100%. 100%. All of his stuff is that way. It's always been that way. Always been that way. You're not real unless like you've got to be out of central casting.
Yeah.
They got to see how you look.
It's not real until it's in the press.
Totally. I mean, Wayne Barrett, that's what, I mean, when he came on this show, do you remember when he came on in that summer?
No, I want to.
Oh, he was on in the summer of
before
2016.
Yeah.
And we had talked quite a bit. I had interviewed Wayne quite a bit in the years before. Not, I don't think we ever talked about Trump prior to 2015 or 2016. Wayne passed
Maybe do
away.
that on a best of in the future.
Yeah. He kept saying over and over again, Felix Seder, who you never hear about anymore. But it'll be interesting. Maybe, I don't know. God forbid.
Plenty of time for that. Just wait.
I really did enjoy him calling Laura Trump an idiot, though. That is, I mean, good for him.
Oh, look at this. What's this? I like it.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 248 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Kevin. I'm calling from Metro Detroit.
Kevin from Metro Detroit. What's on your mind?
That's it. Well, I'm calling to talk about the Listen to Michigan campaign. That's the push to vote uncommitted in the Democratic primary.
Uh-huh.
So, quickly, for those who don't know, the idea is that Biden only beat Trump by 20,000 votes in Michigan, and we want to get that number or more of people to vote uncommitted on that primary ballot in order to pressure him to call for a ceasefire, or maybe Democrats start thinking about putting somebody else up after the success in New Hampshire. We think Michigan and hopefully other states will follow suit. Sorry, a little nervous.
No, you're doing great.
So the ask here is that the callers for this list can be from anywhere, and we're hoping that, I'm on here now talking about it, but we're hoping that anyone can go to listentomichigan.com and scroll down to the bottom, click the volunteer button, and you'll get an email that will give you access to the call list. All we do is we get onto a Zoom call around 5:30 on weekdays. They're a little bit longer during the weekends. You come and go when you can. And yeah, it's for those with experience or without experience, anyone's welcome. You just call a list of, there's two lists, one of Arab American, Muslim American, and MENA Americans. And then we also are calling Bernie and Warren voters. So it's really, really easy to call and talk to them and get an uncommitted vote. And if anyone has phone banking experience, we're not using an Excel list here. This is a program called Scale to Win. And it is basically you call a phone number, push a button, and you wait until you hear a beep and you talk to the voters.
It's super easy.
And it's the easiest phone banking I've ever done in my life. Yeah. It's amazing.
Okay. Two things. One, as far as I know, Biden won Michigan by closer to 200,000 votes. Maybe, maybe it was like one, something around there. Maybe it was a little bit less. Trump won Michigan by, I think, closer to 20,000 in 2016.
That may be it. I'm sorry.
But nevertheless, the real point of this, in my mind, is to register. This is when a protest vote works, really. It creates pressure and shows that there is a constituency there that is pissed about this and is prepared. The threat is, I think, in some respects, can be more powerful than the actual, more effective than the actual
Absolutely. And
with ultimate withholding. Nevertheless, so where do people go? Just give us the website again.
Again, that's listentomichigan.com.
Listentomichigan.com. We'll put that in the...
and down at the bottom, there's a volunteer button.
And the primary is at the end of this month,
February
right?
27th.
In 2 weeks.
February 27th.
All right. So we will put the link in the podcast and YouTube description today. Thank you for
that's huge.
throwing in with that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Of course.
Right, bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Good thing you can do that phone banking from anywhere, incidentally. Calling from a 713 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hello. Is this me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is Mo from Texas.
Mo from Texas. What's on your mind?
Yes. Just a couple things. I'll keep it short. One is I just want to bring up that just going on social media, and it really upsets me that a lot of liberals in this country have their empathy just stop when it comes to Palestine. So I just saw this article. I've tried looking it up, but I can't remember. And it was an op-ed, and it was basically saying, "Oh, what do you want us to do? Move all the Israelis out of Israel and give it all back?" And it's like, no, serious people are not saying that. And it's just really maddening that they're just coming back with these non-serious arguments and just ignoring the humanity and empathy when it comes to Palestinians. That's one. The second thing is unrelated, but I just thought it was important. I'm a resident doctor in Texas, and we work with the underserved in my clinic. And one of my patients, just yesterday, her Medicaid was taken away from her. And I know you talked about that a little bit ago. And so they're just relegating her basically to dying.
The COVID rollbacks in terms of Medicaid, I think ultimately when they're done is going to be around 10 million people. Generally, and these numbers, I don't have these numbers right in front of me, but generally, I think we're at like pre-COVID Medicaid rolls are somewhere around 70 million, 65 million. They had been expanded by about 10 million or so during COVID because the eligibility requirements were relaxed, or there was less, I think, sort of administrative requirements, and those have been reinstated. I mean, a lot of people get bumped off just by the sake of like paperwork is done in a different way, and it's not even a question of like genuine need. But what's absurd, as you obviously realize, is we have right now almost half the country, a little bit less, is covered under some form of government health insurance. We could just expand this to everybody, and the cost would be like, I mean, would it exist? Yes. And it would, people's sort of across the board, people's taxes would go up a little bit, but not nearly as much as what it costs for their healthcare insurance, their health insurance, and we would ensure that everybody gets covered.
Yeah. and it's just frustrating because they're basically leaving it to, doctors to figure out this, navigate the scarce resources in the community and to get them patient to fill out the paperwork. And it's just, we don't know what to do. It's maddening.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate
my last.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, well, last question is I wanted just recommendations, just like a leftist perspective on Iraq, like a book. I know there's a good podcast that goes over the whole Iraq war and and you've had the guest on.
Blowback, I think it was.
Yeah. Yes. But I was wondering if Matt or anyone, you guys had any recommendations on a good leftist perspective, like books to read.
Spencer Ackerman's last book was really more about the war on terror, but it involves like sort of the impetus for our invasion of Iraq. And it also talks about sort of like how we got, it ties in that stuff into where we are today. So I would say Spencer Ackerman. I'm trying to think of like, what was the, there's a couple of good, but I would read that Spencer Ackerman one.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I think like David Korn had one like Hubris that I remember liking way back. There's probably been better ones written since then.
Yeah, there's other ones, but start with that Spencer Ackerman one. The inside, I want to say Emerald City, but it was not. It was about. Shoot, I can't remember what it's called now. This is going deep into the deep recesses of. Hold on, let me just do this.
Imperial Life in the Emerald City.
Oh, that's I think what it was.
Inside Iraq's Green Zone.
Yes,
it's by Rajiv Chandrasekhar.
Yep.
That's when that Matt Damon movie was made out of.
There was a Matt Damon movie made about it.
I'm pretty sure that the Iraq movie.
That's worth reading.
Got it. Okay.
That's a
Thanks
very
so much,
good
guys.
one. I mean, I don't know if from a leftist perspective, I mean, it really all you had to do is have like any type of like reasonable perspective, and you'd realize what a disaster it was. So, that's a good one in terms of getting like a critiqued awareness of what was going on there.
Yes.
All right.
Sounds great. Thank
Appreciate
you so much.
the call.
Appreciate you guys. Bye.
Legalized billionaires. Matt's mind is amazing. Never ceases to amaze us. That was a great piece of analysis just now on Trump's mindset.
Oh, the mediated through TV thing. Yeah. You see it everywhere now. These old guys.
Calling from a 503 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yes, it is.
Hi, my name is Juliet. I'm from Portland. And I want to say...
Go ahead.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, my name is Juliet. I'm from Portland. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Juliet. What's on your mind?
Well, I want to say, first off, Left is Best. Thank you for all the coverage that you do on important topics. I mean, obviously, like, you're one of the few bigger voices out there that really covers trans issues, and it's really hard for us to get any sort of recognition for a lot of the stuff that's going on. And having Aaron on regularly to update, because I think a lot of her work is just really phenomenal. But I am an activist out here, and also like a performer, and so I live in this very like weird public space being trans that a lot of people don't have to. And I thought I just wanted to give some perspective on some of the things that we have to go through when we're talking about these issues. In Oregon, there's a legislative proposal that is trying to codify or rewrite our Constitution to codify bodily autonomy for trans people and cis women specifically. And the legislation has a lot of traction, especially right now with it being a hot button issue, and it's being spearheaded by a queer activist group in the state that does a lot of really, really good work. But even in this like queer and trans-led organization, they are adamantly opposed to letting trans people be at the forefront of the conversation. The closest that they'll do is allow like the parents of trans kids to be the representatives, because they feel that having trans people in public speaking on trans issues is a losing strategy, and I just fundamentally don't agree, and I find it very frustrating. And I wanted to share that perspective, and because I don't think that we win the issue of trans acceptance by hiding trans people away, and I see this a lot even in areas where there is like a lot of support. They're just like, oh no, we can't have you there, so just let us speak on your behalf. And not only do I think that doesn't win, because I think that in order for people to accept trans people, they need to see and understand trans people, but also that cis people are never going to be as intimately familiar with the issues and the challenges that overcome them when discussing these things.
I would also add to it, I think what is problematic is the subtext when you're trying to advocate for trans people and you hide trans people, the subtext is that there's a reason to hide trans people. I mean, it's like, sometimes they say like, if you want to see a debate, you turn the volume off and you watch it. Like that's what's happening there. Like the subtext of hiding trans people in this context is we got to hide trans people, and that's right. Cuts against the thing. I mean, there are organizations. I mean, I can't speak to. I don't know the dynamics of what's going on in that particular instance, but I mean, there are organizations that are timid, in terms of the public. They are afraid in terms of their donors. They're afraid. I mean, who knows what the different, various incentives or disincentives that they're operating under. But I mean, I agree with you from a like a strategic or a tactical part. It's a mistake, I think.
Yeah, and I'm an actor and a comedian, like a working comedian. I go out and tour places, and I go do rural shows, and I know that Oregon and like Washington have reputations for being blue states, West Coast states, but as soon as you leave major metropolitan areas, exactly,
it's pretty. There's a lot of like militia stuff there and survivory type of stuff, and yes.
And my point, like, obviously I don't go to these shows alone, and I always have backup, because, I mean, you don't want to take chances. But I do a lot of material on being trans and, like, kind of making fun of, how cis people view trans people. And I get laughs. I get laughs in sports bars in Estacada. Like, it's not about it. And I have people who come up to me after my shows who are, near tears, who realize that they have been making wrong assumptions, who have rejected people in their families because of these assumptions. And that, I think that's what wins the day. And I think that, if we have larger platforms where we get to speak on these issues ourselves, that's what changes, the perspective. So I just really wanted to highlight that, and I wanted to thank all of you for actually doing that and having trans people report on trans issues, and and not shying away from the conversation. I know Emma speaks on this from time to time and says that she doesn't want to speak on trans issues because she's not trans, but I would just encourage her to do so anyway, because no one else is going to. And if that's the best that we have is cis people advocating for us, then I'll take it.
No, I get it. I mean, hopefully, it's. I mean, hopefully, it's a dark time in some respects, but I think it's also relatively hopeful. I mean, there is I think there's obviously an onslaught of legislation. I mean, we just had Erin on, and I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head how many bills that have already, sort of like either passed or been introduced in the 45 days of this year. But, but I do feel like the electoral salience of it, at least as a national issue, I think they realize that's not going to happen. And I also, we're going to have a big chunk of people who are going to, with all due respect to people who are dying, going to die. Like we have the generation ahead of mine. I want to make it clear, I'm not a boomer, but I'm right on the cusp. But the boomers are heading into there's going to be a cliff, essentially, over the course of like a 5-10 year period that we're getting close to, where a lot of older people with narrower perspectives are going to, check out, and younger people just have, a much better perspective on this. Obviously, not all young people, not, but I think the culture, I think society is progressing, but obviously, I just say that as a way of providing some type of optimism. But
I hope that that's true. I can't bank on the idea that progress is inevitable,
of course,
because I think we have to.
Yes, it's not inevitable, and I don't mean to imply that, but
right.
Appreciate the call, and it sounds like you're doing a good job out there, so appreciate it.
We're trying. We're always trying. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
I don't know if we're gonna have time for any more calls, folks. If you want to stay on, caveat holdor. What would you call that? Caveat.
What's the Latin word for someone who's waiting?
Waitor? I don't know. Which one of these should we do?
Caveat manere.
Is Steve Bannon? Yeah. Okay. Sure. What Bannon's really good at is and Karl Rove was really good at this too. When George Bush was running for re-election, and it was pretty well known that George Bush had sort of skirted around his military service. Yeah.
Where were you?
Look, this is what happened.
Somebody probably remembers me doing stuff.
He got his dad to get him into the National Guard instead of actually going to Vietnam. And then he sort of I don't know. Did he go AWOL? Yeah, he probably did.
Just chilling.
Chilling. He got out early. Let's put it that way. He had a doctor's appointment. And John Kerry, who served in Vietnam, got a Purple Heart, came back, testified in front of the Senate, I think it was. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and famously said, who is going to be the last man to die for a mistake in Vietnam?
There's a Nixon tape of him reacting to that. He's like, God damn, this guy's going to be a politician one day.
Yep,
he's going to crush us.
But they knew that this was a liability, so they immediately attacked John Kerry as some type of war fraud, essentially.
Crazy.
They swift-boated him. Here's Steve Bannon. Like,
I think people don't get the Swift vote has the element that you're covering up the liability of your own candidate. Because I think like when I learned about it, it was like, oh, just an unfair attack.
no, but it is to neutralize the attacks on your opponent too.
Right.
And it's also to use the common parlance, stuff that's in the ether, and use it that way. And here is Bannon, and he is upset about the apartheid that's happening, but not that apartheid.
But did make progress versus the rearview mirror, which stands at 3.4. Now, if you consider 3.1,
the great Rick Santelli. This was a hot print. Market, don't take it from me. Wall Street's already down 400 points. Headline in CNBC. Inflation persistent, right? All the happy talk. Okay, let's go back in time. We want to make sure the War Room Posse is as smart as possible on this topic. Every institution that we have, because this is a fourth turning, they're collapsing around us. Their rearguard action is to stop Trump. All of them. The lawfare, all of it. And even the financial, which I'm going to get to here in a second. Because they cannot allow Trump to return to the White House savvier, smarter, tougher, more focused, with the MAGA movement ascendant. That's end of game to the globalist. That's breaking. What they try to do is set an apartheid state here in the United States for the MAGA movement, the deplorables. And we're in the process of breaking that.
All right, pause it for 1 second. I want you to, he's saying that we're in the process, like we have it, like he's in the process of breaking the apartheid that exists for the deplorables. Where are we witnessing that apartheid state?
Also, the guys who had the plan for the electors are talking about lawfare, which is great.
Exactly. But what is the apartheid? It's sometimes they make fun of you on Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah,
what's the apartheid?
Right, because
like,
even the invasion.
What does
the invasion is anti-apart? That's like forced integration.
Exactly. Like what is like even the people who hear him say that? What do they think it is?
What is the War Room Posse? How do they interpret that?
What does the War Room Posse think that the ongoing apartheid in this country is? They do this all the time. They will take a word that is become like they do a Google trend search and see what people are looking up. And there, of course, people are looking up because of Israeli society. And they know that it's out there, and so they just apply it in like this fascinating way. Go back, it's really fascinating. It's like? And I will also say, like, this whole notion of they're all just trying to get rid of Trump because they want to go after the deplorables.
Right.
It's fascinating. But what's also interesting is, do you remember? It wasn't that long ago he was talking like Trump is sort of the moderate in this movement. But even he knows they need Trump right now because there is no heir apparent to this movement at this point. Yeah. There'll be somebody will come up, but it's not clear yet.
But he uses language like apartheid and lawfare, like, when they say gorillas know how to language because they know how to like sign things and they like learn the word for curious. And it's like, oh, this gorilla knows the word curious. It's like, no, it knows that when it says the word curious, it gets a reward for that. Like that's how
100%
deep they're working with language.
Exactly. It is just, these are words that are around what I'm talking about. There was a guy I used to do comedy with who I would write a script and I would just be amazed. Like he would go off it on sketches. And I can't remember exactly which bit it was. But I was just like, I was in awe. I was like, he's pulling stuff like that is so, and he came off and I'm like, dude, that was amazing. He goes, I have no idea what any of that was about. Like he just knew the words were in the sort of the sphere of what the other words that he was saying was. But go ahead, play.
I want to make sure the War Room Posse is as smart as possible on this topic. Every institution that we have, because this is a fourth turning, they're collapsing around us. Their rearguard action is to stop Trump. All of them. the lawfare, all of it, and even the financial, which I'm going to get to here in a second, because they cannot allow Trump to return to the White House savvier, smarter, tougher, more focused, with the MAGA movement ascendant. That's end of game to the globalist. That's breaking what they try to do is set an apartheid state here in the United States for the MAGA movement, the deplorables. And we're in the process of breaking that. That's what this great comeback is MAGA ascendant. Now, remember, the financial community, I think the first time in American history, and I have a pretty good grasp on American financial and economic history. There's been other times, don't get me wrong, when they're all there to support the president, but this is a full-scale coming together, a really merger of the Treasury and Fed function to make sure they flood the zone with every piece of QE and stuff they're doing off the books to jack up this economy.
Pause it for 1 second. They've raised rates under Joe Biden at a pace in which now, of course, like when I was a kid, the interest rates were like 18, 19% or something. But they have raised rates as a multiple of like, I don't know, 4, like 3.5, like 3 times, 3x. I don't even know what it would be. Maybe at least double and a half, 2 point, and they've had, I don't think there was ever a time where they raised rates this much. And it's quite clear. I mean, the stock market had already baked in the supposed lowering of rates in 2024. And then when it makes it look like, oh, maybe we won't be getting those as much as we think, then the stock market drops or whatnot. I mean, none of this stuff I really care that much about. But what he's saying is fundamentally untrue. Like if the Fed was dire to help Joe Biden, they would have started to drop rates already.
Yeah. No, he's right. It is apartheid. They're going to treat MAGA just like South Africa treated the Zulus.
MAGA apartheid.
MAGA equals Zulu. It's everyone saying it.
When does he go? Like isn't this guy supposed to be in jail for for his border wall thing? What's happening with that case?
I'm on MAGA stan. I'm ruling my MAGA stan fiefdom.
The idea that it's not just that there's an apartheid going on, they're actually in the process of breaking the apartheid.
So the We Build the Wall scheme trial is set for May 24. So it's coming up in 3 months.
In other words, the apartheid trial? That's right. Where they impose apartheid on him for scamming people out of building wall money?
We're going to build a giant wall to keep us safe from exclusionary people.
Oh my God. Jesus. I don't know if there's anything else I want to do on this list. Oh, wait. Are we going to do... we got one more... let's do this Swazi thing. Yeah. All right, there's 2 things about the Swazi thing that you should know that is interesting. Put up this... we've had Lee Drutman on, haven't we, on the program, I feel like? A political science, I can't remember, but his name sounds familiar to me. But put up his graph. This gives you a context. Political scientists, competitive House districts are disappearing. You can see that in 98, there were 164 districts that were competitive. I don't know how what his parameters are for this. It may be like, a R +1 or a D +1, something within that range. That's the partisan index. I'm just guessing, but however it is, maybe people can quibble with what his parameters are, what constitutes a competitive House district. But this is consistent with what everybody sees. But here you can really see it on a graph. And if you really look, like there was a big drop from 98 to 2008. And really it was in the wake of 9/11, there was a drop, and then it levels out. And then around 2010, when the godfather of gerrymandering, who's now dead, I can't remember his name, had basically come up with this plan. Hoffler. And that kicks in, and it almost like takes a little bit of time before it becomes a feedback loop. Now there are competing theories about why this has happened. And it's probably a little bit of both. One, much more gerrymandering. And two, and I think this is what 98 to 2000, in that realm is, falling, into the 2000s, is a certain amount of self-sorting that's happening. But it's a little bit of both. And the gerrymandering is definitely the point. But we have, I think it is, off the top of my head, 16 districts in which you have a Republican and Joe Biden carried the district. Now maybe it's 15, based upon the New York 4th. Is that what it was? Is it 16 or 18 or now it could be down to 15 or 17?
There were 14 held that were up for election 22, so 14 U.S. House districts. So I think would be 13.
Okay.
Now,
nevertheless, the number of districts that are in play is getting smaller and smaller. And what that means is, certainly for the Republicans and maybe for the Democrats, although it's less clear because you get people like Tom Suozzi, right? And you have a president like Joe Biden. But certainly on the Republican side, okay, so it was 18, now it's 17 according to CNN. These Congress people get elected in a district that is not competitive in terms of Republican and Democrat. So the only thing that becomes competitive is the primary. And when the primary becomes competitive on the Republican side, and it becomes the only competitive race you run, you get pulled to the right. That's what happens. That's why we have so many lunatics in the House. And increasingly, lunatics in the Senate. Because you have states that are no longer competitive except for the primary. It's a red state. We don't have the same dynamic with Democrats. Because, frankly, Democrats are a bigger umbrella, both in terms of demographics, in terms of money, race, ethnicity, gender, and ideology. On all of those accords, the Democrats are more diverse. The Republican Party is basically a white party. And there are pockets in which they have working class voters, but they still remain a party that is white, pretty wealthy. The one trend that is changing in that regard is that the Democrats, and we had Laney Newman on the other day to talk about how Democrats over the past 40 years lost union voters. I think that story is as much about the loss of unions as it is Democrats losing union voters. I think the fact is that higher union density will bring about more Democratic voters and a better Democratic Party, because this constituency, as they start to sort of I think the reason why Democrats lost union voters is because of the diminishment in the number of union voters. And that you hit a certain density with unionization that begins to change the nature of communities. That people start to go, that was the most interesting part about their research to me, is the functions that unions played, the union members played outside of their union within a community. Because they're just
keeping people organized.
They're keeping people organized, but it's not a conscious thing. They're not going out and proselytizing as a mission. They're just going out and being they're just learning from their experience and being in a union and seeing that other things can improve through people having solidarity with each other. And so unionization is the most important thing, I think, in terms of making a better society. And I think ultimately what that better society ultimately becomes, I don't care. I don't care what party it is that ultimately does that. But with greater unionization, they will start electing better politicians. That's just a fact. Let's just talking about Swazi for a moment. Swazi wins by about 8 or 9 percentage points, which is consistent with what Joe Biden won that same district back in 2020. Not the same amount of voters. I think about 200,000 less voters out of I think the numbers here were 160 or are going to end up being around 190, I think, when all said and done. And I think there was 4 something in 2020. That's just off the top of my head. But the percentages are really sort of what is indicative. I think that it's going to be overassessed that his toughness on immigration and toughness on crime is what drove people to vote there. I think this victory is purely a function, or largely a function, of people don't like Republicans. And here is Dana Bash. Now, again, this is in New York, but it's a district that George Santos won by, I think pretty handily, and the Republicans outspent in this district. You got a candidate who was a sitting congressman before, so he's familiar, and he was never voted out. He quit to run for governor. So there's a lot of advantages as to why this would be the case. But there's also this.
I heard from voters that they were these are obviously very well-informed voters,
right,
but they were at the polling station. They were voting early. And several of them said to me that they don't want to vote for the Republican because it's clearly impossible to get a solution on the issue of immigration. They said the border problem, the immigration issue, the migrant issue in their district was the top issue for them. And that the fact that Republicans killed that bipartisan deal put them over the edge to vote for Tom Swazi. And immigration was their top issue. So I think that there's something I heard from
now.
voters.
All right, to be clear here, we don't know the level of understanding that people had of that immigration bill, because more often than not, when Democrats provide a grand bargain or a comprehensive immigration bill, you get stuff like, we're going to give you a path to citizenship with Dreamers. We're going to expand the number of asylum seekers. I mean, people don't necessarily have that savvy. But I think one thing that people should be careful about, and I'm not being a doomer here, it is very good that Democrats are winning special elections. Really good that they won this one in Pennsylvania to maintain the state house. That's very important. This, the more tenuous that the Republican majority in the House is, the better. But I think part of the reason why there is overperformance in these special elections by Democrats over the past 4 years, I think part of it is abortion, without a doubt. Swazi apparently is, a lot of his ads towards the end were all about abortion. But I think it really is because Democrats now are appealing to more educated voters than they were in the past. College educated voters. They have lost it in sort of non-college educated voters. But college educated voters, I feel pretty confident in saying, are more vigilant about voting in general. They are more likely to be following political news and more likely to be aware of a special election. And so I don't know that polls can actually sort of model for a special election in that way. Now, this is just a theory I have. And it may not be the case, but Democrats keep overperforming in, the polls. I'm talking about the polls now, because there was no poll that had him up 8 percentage points or 9 percentage points. There was some that had him up 2% and this and that. And again, the Republican candidate was not a good candidate. But I'm saying, why were the polls not accurate? And I think, why did they undercount the Democratic vote? And I think it's because in special elections now, because Democrats are appealing to to more college-educated voters, they're just appealing to people who are just more aware of when a special election would be happening. Because most people don't pay that much attention to a special election. That's just my theory.
Yeah, I think like the conventional wisdom on some demographic voter apathy in areas like this might be kind of might be more out the window than it was before. That, like, as you said, that
They're not modeling these polls correct. Now, I don't know. Maybe they will undercount. Maybe they're doing the same thing with the national presidential polls. I don't know. But they clearly undercounted the Democratic vote in this.
And it was also interesting to see how a lot of like the trade publications, of like Politico, Punchbowl, etc., all were like, it's coming out to be a really, really close race, and then ultimately it essentially mirrored Biden's victory 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It didn't show a fundamental realignment, so to speak, from the presidential election. It kind of showed the exact determination despite different amounts of voter turnout.
Exactly. Oh, Nick from PA says, show the acorn cop. Have you seen that video? Oh. You guys can play that tomorrow. Folks, that it completes the phone call portion. I've seen that video. It's amazing.
At first I thought James O'Keefe, but then, I saw that too.
What's that? James O'Keefe?
Acorn. I was thinking like Acorn Cop. But
this is a cop in Florida. He's actually, I think he was a sheriff department.
Deputy, yeah.
He walks by his car and...
So he arrested a guy and
And the guy's in the car,
The guy's in his vehicle and he hears a sound and immediately assumes that he failed to search the guy properly and he's being fired upon by the guy in the car and rolls onto the ground and starts shooting at his own vehicle. And it turns out that an acorn had fallen and hit the roof.
Yeah. And he also thought he had been hit.
That was also funny, yeah. $100,000 a year for that guy. He's been fired, but...
Adam from Indiana, I thought the godfather of gerrymandering was gerrymander. All right. 5 IMs. Sorry, we're really late today. MSDN Cedar. Sam, will you be my platonic Valentine? Of course. There's, of course. I would never say no. Joanna, I worked for UPS as a UX designer during the pandemic. One of the reasons I left was because all the anti-union propaganda they pushed, I couldn't stand it. They're terrified of tech unionizing. I'm also from Louisville. I worked at WorldPort. Also, the LDSA, we help unions. D-Wax Shellac. Hey, Sam, we just booked a 7-night trip to Disney World and Universal Studios for spring break with my kids, 13 and 11. I need to hear your stories, tips, recommendations, and what to avoid. Do we make a big mistake or I have fun? 13 and 11 is I think, the perfect ages for that. I would tell you it is worth it for Disney to stay at one of the Disney properties. I don't think it's prohibitively more expensive, but you get in a half an hour early on the day. And if you want to go to all that Hollywood Disney stuff, you got to get there at like exactly at 7. And then I don't know if they're still doing that nightmare of the Disney Plus apps thing, but bring multiple devices that you can be refreshing for 6:59 a.m. in the morning, if that's the case. Get some sleep. Drek. Yes, I know how to pronounce Louisville. I know it. It's the one thing I do know how to pronounce. Sam's greased up calf. Sam, it's called Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. And the final IM of the day. Let's see here. Who should we choose? Who haven't we heard from in a long time? Well, I can't find any. Oh, congressional baseball fan. Baseball season is coming soon, so just want to shout out Steve Scalise in the bullpen of his life. Will he get the call to come in, or is it time to hang it up? He actually made it to that vote last night. Bradley, Matt, Emma in absentia. Good job today, folks. We'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know